that with our friends and our allies, we will be at the forefront of the defence of the free democratic world. And under my leadership, the United Kingdom will always stand up for our interests, deter our enemies, and defend our values. Now, it's my enormous pleasure to introduce Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary-General. Jens, thank you for joining us today. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Prime Minister Sunak Rishi. It's great to be here in Poland together with you today. The United Kingdom is a highly valued and staunch and essential NATO ally, contributing greatly to our shared security in so many different ways. You lead NATO forces in Estonia. British jets help guard the skies over our eastern flank. The Royal Navy helps keep critical sea lanes open. The United Kingdom is also at the centre of the exercise Steadfast Defender, currently underway and involving more than 16,000 British military personnel. And we are today here in Poland with British troops, a physical embodiment of your commitment to NATO. So thank you to all of you. Prime Minister, your announcement today confirms the vital role the UK plays in our alliance. The United Kingdom will spend 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030. Allies agreed at our summit in Vilnius last year that 2% is a minimum. And once again, the UK is leading by example. Just as you did in 2014, after the illegal annexation of Crimea, when you were one of the first allies to provide training and military support to Ukraine. And after the full-scale invasion in 2022, you stepped up significantly, training thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and providing billions of pounds of military assistance. And today, your announcement of additional support, including more ammunition, air defence and deep precision strike capabilities, shows once again the British people's commitment to Ukraine. I welcome your cast iron commitment to continue these levels of support to Ukraine for as long as needed. In NATO, we are now addressing how to put our support for Ukraine on a more robust and predictable footing, including with a multi-year financial commitment. So, Prime Minister, your commitment sets us on the right direction. I also welcome that other allies are taking action, not least Poland, which provides key capabilities to Ukraine and hosts 1 million Ukrainian refugees. Over the weekend, the US House of Representatives approved a major aid package for Ukraine. This will enable the US to provide substantial additional support to Ukraine quickly. And last Friday, NATO defence ministers agreed to further bolster Ukraine's air defences. Germany's delivery of another Patriot system is imminent, and other allies made concrete commitments in that NATO meeting, with deliveries expected soon. Faced with the biggest conflict on the European continent since the Second World War, our decisions today will have consequences for generations to come. We must not falter. We live in a more dangerous world. Authoritarian powers are increasingly aligned. Russia is receiving support for its war of aggression from China, Iran and North Korea. This reminds us that security is not regional, security is global. And we must work with our like-minded partners around the world to preserve and protect transatlantic security. NATO is a defensive alliance. We do not seek conflict with Russia, but we will keep our 1 billion people safe. The 10,000 NATO troops based here in Poland send an unmistakable message that NATO will protect and defend all allies. So, Prime Minister Sunak, Thank you again for UK's vital contributions to NATO. Thank you.
Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show. That was the Secretary-General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, speaking in Warsaw, Poland. Short while ago, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak delivered a comprehensive speech on defence spending. Let's get some instant reaction now with Christopher Hope, our political editor. Chris, welcome to the show. So a comprehensive set of measures listed by Rishi Sunak there. Tell us what happened.
That's right. The PM set out what he described an axis of autocratic states: Russia, Iran, China. He said that he's working now with partners. He said China was working now with an unlimited partnership with Russia. The UK is very concerned about that. He announced plans to increase our spending to 2.5% of our gross domestic product, basically our UK turnover, by 2030 to £87 billion a year. By 2030, it starts now, that increase in spending. It puts the UK, he said, on a war footing. He made very clear that we'll put the UK defence industry on a war footing. Money spent on munition support, surface-to-air missiles made in Bolton, weapons made in Northern Ireland, at the forefront of the global defence industry. The UK will be the second biggest spender on defence in NATO outside of the USA. 2.5% of GDP is a lot of money. It's not as much as Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, was calling for just last month. He wants that figure to be 3% in the Tory party manifesto. This figure is being signed off by Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor. You see him walking down the steps there on the left of the picture. Jeremy Hunt in the middle, Rishi Sunak on the right, Grant Shapps. They've hammered out this number, but it's not as much as Grant Shapps wanted, but it's backed by Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, so that's ironclad now, but it won't be what the Defence Secretary wanted.
And in fact, Chris, you and I spoke about this 11 days ago, 2.5% GDP. That's precisely what the Labour Party was saying that they wanted to do. Included in the offering today, Chris, was a huge amount of extra support to Ukraine, £500 million, 4 million rounds of ammo, 400 vehicles, 60 boats. Another huge amount of support offered to Ukraine.
And that's right, and it's sending a message, I think, to the rest of the world to act now to save lives in Ukraine. We've seen David Cameron over in America. He's been trying to drum up support for that package signed off by the House of Representatives just last weekend. And he spent a lot of his own personal political capital on that. And I think that's why the UK is seen as a leader. Ever since Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, the UK has been a leader on getting this kind of action agreed by Western allies to support NATO. We haven't heard yet from President Zelensky of Ukraine, but we will be. On screen now, you see the PM, Rishi Sunak, taking questions from the travelling press pack, and that's what he'll be doing now.
And Chris, there was a huge amount of praise there from the Secretary-General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, commending Britain for its action in 2014 in Crimea and, of course, at the beginning of the Ukraine war. And NATO is something which will no doubt come into view when, if there's a change of president in America in November. NATO sees itself potentially as under threat. This, however, today, Chris, is a severe strengthening, a cementing of NATO as a cohesive defensive force.
Yeah, certainly if other countries follows through. The UK is one of the first countries in NATO to hit that 2% defence spending target of GDP, and now there are many as 11 of them. Don't forget, we remember, don't we, how Donald Trump drove that forward. He said in terms, in that famous NATO summit shortly after he became president back in the last decade, he made very clear that start spending the money or we can't guarantee to defend you in case of an attack. And that really was a wake-up call, I think, for NATO countries. We'll see more similar language, I think, if Donald Trump wins the US election on the 5th of November later this year. And that's why it's so important that I think the UK is taking a stand here. It's also, I think, a signal, I think, to the European Union. There's talk about more greater defence cooperation between EU nations, and that is a threat, I think, to NATO as it stands. So this is the UK saying we sit behind NATO. NATO is the organ, the grouping, I think, which defends Western Europe against the threat from Russia and further afield. The EU can't do that, but there is some pressure from, say, France and other countries to give that kind of extra defence angle to the EU, and that is a threat to NATO's influence, and that's why I think this support will be widely welcomed across the Western Europe.
Yeah, and indeed, Chris, later in the show, we'll be speaking with defence analysts and experts. And we know, Chris, that this will land very well with them because they've been telling us for months and months and months that extra money is required. Chris, we have the smallest British Army since the Napoleonic time, the smallest RAF since its inception after the First World War, and so few sailors, we're decommissioning ships. So from a defence, strategic and analytical point of view, this is a much-needed shot in the arm for the British Armed Forces.
Yeah, but judging from the detail we have, and it's quite scant at the moment, Martin, from the Prime Minister in Warsaw, is it looks like it's just spending on munitions and other weaponry, not on manpower, in a sense that people, they want to withdraw troops if they can from the front line as much as possible and put machines and drones into their place. And that's what's happening here. So it looks like there's more money being spent, as I said there, on SAM's missiles and others being made in Bolton. We haven't yet heard from Grant Shapps. He will welcome this, but he did say as recently as last month that he's coined the phrase moving from post-war to pre-war, we have to be much better prepared, he said, and he made very clear in an interview with the Daily Mail he wants 3% of GDP spent on defence. Well, he's lost that battle. It's 2.5% between now and 2030. But even despite that, it does make Britain and UK widely into an outlier in defence spending.
OK, Chris, so thank you very much. We'll speak to you later in the show. And let's get some more reaction now from GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So much anticipated ramping up of spending as a proportion of GDP, 2.5%, a significant rise. Big question is, Mark, is it enough?
Well, there's no doubt it is a significant rise. I think Rishi Sunak's position on we'll go to 2.5% when the economic conditions are right was just unsustainable when you have the likes of his own Defence Secretary talking about us being in a pre-war world, and the fact, as Chris mentioned there, that he would like to see defence spending rise to 3%. And of course, then you look at our allies around the world, and especially in Europe, they are ramping up their defence spending, largely because of what is going on in Ukraine, but also with an eye to the worsening situation in the Middle East as well. So I think he had to come up with something. It's not the full 2.5% right away. It will be phased in over the next 6 years, but it will amount to £65 billion more in defence spending. And that will allow them to do things like try to enhance our ammunition and missile stocks. Of course, much of those ammunition and missile stocks have been depleted, sending them off to Ukraine, and they need to be filled back home, but we also need to supply the regular drumbeat of ammunition and missiles for Ukraine as well. But in addition to that, he spoke about the need to try to revamp our procurement process, which at the moment has seen vast overruns in terms of the cost, because you have very technologically advanced systems that a few years down the line, after systems are first commissioned, where senior officers are coming in and say, well, we'd like this edition and that edition, all that adds to cost overruns. And then take in the economic climate that we're in with huge inflation in recent years as well, which has meant the increase that we've seen in recent years has actually been subsumed by this increase in inflation, which has meant actually we're seeing often real terms cut in defence spending. So it's certainly to be welcomed. And what's interesting, I think, is just what Labour will do now, because it really piles pressure on them. Is a new Labour government, if they do come in whenever that general election is called, as the pollsters are predicting is the likelihood, are they going to say we're going to reverse this back to the process of 2% of GDP? Well, they've got a strategic defence review that they are going to instigate the second they come into power, if they do indeed win the election. So it kind of, at the end of the day, may be twisting their arm as well into actually following through on 2.5%. Just remember, they have said that they are committed to 2.5% as well, again when economic conditions allow, once they've been able to see if the books balance up and they can sustain this. But now, of course, Rishi Sunak has rather sort of piled on the pressure there.
It's interesting, Mark, you mentioned that 2.5% from the Labour Party, because in fact 11 days ago, that's precisely what Sir Keir Starmer announced as the Labour policy. We spoke with defence analysts, we spoke with Conservative MPs, they said that's a fantastic idea. And now here's Rishi Sunak delivering the same thing. Mark, I want to ask you about, I guess in the grand scheme of things, a relatively small amount of chump change, a mere £500 million that's been given to Ukraine. Nevertheless, that's a significant amount of money, 4 million rounds of ammo, 400 vehicles, 60 boats, a huge amount of continued support to Ukraine. How do you think that will land? I mean, we're short of money in the UK. It's a lot of money. Is that required? Do we need to keep the pressure going in Ukraine? Or are the public running out of sympathy for that war?
Well, certainly those allies of Ukraine are more than alive to what is happening on the battlefields across Ukraine at the moment, where we're seeing a resurgent Russia pushing forward and making gains. Due to an extent because, you know, Ukraine is not getting the stocks of ammunition and air defence and also offensive missile capabilities that it's been asking for quickly enough. You've had that budget issue in the United States where the budget for sending billions of dollars of extra aid to Ukraine has been held up for so long, only finally passing just in recent days there. So that money will be going to them. We had already committed over the next year into 2025, $2.5 billion, now an additional $500 million, taking that up to $3 billion. These leaders, Rishi Sunak and other Western leaders, see with alarm what is happening in Ukraine and really fear that unless there is a significant uptick in those stocks going to Ukraine and going in a timely manner, then the outcome for Ukraine does not look good at all.
OK, Mark White, excellent analysis as ever. And of course, we'll have more throughout the show on this developing story. Thank you, Mark White. Now, change of pace, because it's the final week to see how your next holiday could be on us, with your chance to win a Greek cruise for two, 10 grand in tax-free cash and luxury travel gifts on top. It's a prize worth over 20,000 of your English pounds, and it could be yours. Don't miss out. Here's all the details that you need to hop on board.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Great stuff. Now, you may have noticed it's St George's Day, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. We're about to cross live to Dartford in Kent, where a very special parade to mark the occasion has been taking place. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In every corner of the world, people celebrate English tradition and values as members of the Royal Society of St George. Yet here in England, branches are closing as membership dwindles.
I feel that in this country, St George is all but dead and buried.
Until recently, Stephen Warden from Wigston was president of the Leicestershire branch. Despite spending £1,500 of his own money advertising, he couldn't find enough members to keep it running.
I did everything humanly possible to get new members into the branch from the local environment, but they were just not interested in joining.
He thinks changing demographics and declining interest in the society's values contributed to disappearing membership. But he also blames political leadership at national and local levels. Stephen claims his proposal for a St George's Day parade was repeatedly rejected by Leicester City Council over 10 years. A celebration is planned for St George's Day, but like most cities and towns, no parade will pass through the streets. A Leicester City Council spokesperson said, Leicester's annual celebrations of St George's Day have been organised and funded by the City Council for many decades, and they remain an important part of the city's festival calendar. Some in Leicester say they would like to see more done to celebrate England's patron saint.
I think it's a sign of patriotism. I think it helps the country. We celebrate a lot of religious festivals here.
People forget, I think, what is important to England.
Maybe it's been sort of jumped onto with the wrong crowd, but I think nowadays it's just completely different.
Back in Wigston, St George's Cross flies above Stephen's home.
It makes me feel good because I know at least I've not forgotten St George if everybody else has.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Welcome back. It's 3:23. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now to news of yet another tragedy in the Channel. Just a few hours after the Rwanda law cleared Parliament in the early hours, 5 people, including a child, died while attempting to cross from the France to the UK. And I'm joined now by the Conservative MP for Lichfield, Sir Michael Fabricant. Welcome to the show, Sir Michael. Another tragedy in the Channel, I guess, proves that we are no nearer to stopping the boats, but you'll be pinning your hopes, no doubt, on the fact that the Rwanda bill at last has been passed, and can that act as a deterrent that's so desperately required?
Well, it's interesting that the French have estimated that up to a third of all Channel crossings end in drownings. I mean, that is a remarkable figure. So, yes, I am hoping that the Rwanda legislation that has gone through, and by the way, that makes us nearer and not further away, as you said, Martin, to actually stopping many of these boat crossings. After all, when we said that we would be deporting all Albanian crossings, Albanians back to Albania, 90% of those crossings have now ceased. So while I don't think we'll be able to stop the boats completely, we'll certainly be able to reduce them substantially once those flights get going. Because let's be in no doubt, those people crossing are mainly young men with women and children, but mainly young men who've got access to WhatsApp, and they will know full well that they will be deported and will not be allowed to remain in the United Kingdom if they come here illegally, as they are doing.
Isn't the huge problem here, though, Sir Michael, that you say you closed the bridge to Albania, as it were, but now the majority are from Vietnam? This is a global problem, an ever-shifting problem, a problem that seemingly won't stop. And the big question is the relatively small numbers that can effectively, if indeed those flights take off, be sent to Rwanda. Can it cope? Will it simply be overwhelmed by the numbers coming in, way over 6,000 already this year?
Yeah, and as you quite rightly say, Martin, this is a global problem, not just for the United Kingdom, but for the United States as well, who are seeing huge numbers, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people moving from Central and South America towards the United States. So it's a major problem affecting all countries around the world. But yes, I do think it'll work. I think people will be deterred from coming across to the UK if they think there's a reasonable chance that they won't be allowed to stay here. I might say that the Labour Party are offering a different solution. What they're saying is that they will do a deal with the European Union. And that deal will mean something like 150 to 200,000 people coming here in a quota. The problem with that is that those who aren't in that quota will still try to cross the channel illegally. So it'll be a double whammy for us. 150, 200,000 coming in all the time legally with the EU, plus the boat crossings. We have to offer a deterrent, and that includes those Vietnamese you mentioned.
So, Michael, could I get a quick reaction from you, please? Make it quick if we could. Rishi Sunak just delivered a huge pledge of extra defence spending in Warsaw, the verge of £75 billion. Are you happy about that?
Well, I'm delighted. Look, I've just been looking while Rishi was talking at the scale. It's worth noting that even now, before the statement that he made, we have the largest defence budget in Europe, far bigger than that of France, far bigger than that of Germany. So we've got nothing to be ashamed of now on the spending. And to go up to 2.5% is fantastic. So I'm very, very pleased. And we need it for all our safety here in Europe.
OK, thanks for joining us on the show, Sir Michael, Fabricant, Conservative MP for Lichfield. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, moving on, it's St George's Day and we've been getting into the spirit of things here at GB News. And let's cross now to Dartford and join our presenters Stephen Dixon and Ellie Costello. Hello, guys. Saw the wonderful parade earlier. You've captured the national mood.
Oh, it's been wonderful here, Martin, to be I should say, happy St George's Day, and welcome to Dartford. We've got a good few locals round us as they're back in the pub, as you can tell, because the parade's all done and dusted, but it's been a wonderful experience, and I think what's really important is so many children involved in this, because it's not just about St George and being sort of traditionally English, it's about bringing people of all backgrounds together actually here to celebrate having some national pride in England. And having that instilled in young people is really, really important. And it's really celebrated here. It's just been a really lovely day, hasn't it?
It was really lovely. And that's the thing that struck us the most, actually, Martin, was when we were in front of the school children earlier, and they were just so excited. They'd been preparing for this day for weeks. We saw papier-mâché dragons, didn't we, and shields, and they were English roses. I mean, it was just wonderful. They couldn't wait to be there. And the weather held out for us, thankfully, because there was a bit of a worry, was it? It was very English weather, very cloudy with a touch of rain, but it did stay nice and dry for us, and the children then paraded through the streets, through Dartford High Street, and then on to the Central Park, wasn't it? It was wonderful. It was just the most wonderful celebration of being English.
And actually, the Lord Lieutenant of Kent, representative of His Majesty the King, was here, and she gave a few words as well. So that was really, really nice to have the King's representative here. I think if that's not an indication this should be a bank holiday, I don't know what is.
Well, speaking to people here on the street, that is something that they really support. This should be a bank holiday. In fact, a lot of people that we've met here today have taken the day off anyway. They've been in the pub drinking since about 10 o'clock this morning. They're still here now, a lot of them. So it has been a fantastic day for Dartford. We were in businesses earlier, weren't we? Coffee shops and cake shops. They love St George's Day because they know this parade comes through the town every single year. It gets bigger every single year, more and more children and businesses and charities getting involved, and they love it for local business as well. So it's just a really positive day, isn't it?
Absolutely smashing. I'll tell you what, Martin, next year you need to get yourself out and about.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Drinking for England, that's what they say, no doubt. They say they're doing it for king and country. And by the way, guys, it's not lost on me. Your colour-coordinated St George's Day outfit's magnificent. I'd expect no less from the pair of you. Looking good. Stephen Dixon, Eddie Costello, superb. All the fun of the fair there in Dartford. Superb stuff. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. In a few minutes, I'll be joined by our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, as Prince Louis celebrates his 6th birthday with a wonderful royal photograph. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Cheers, Martin. 3:30 are top stories this hour. The Prime Minister has announced plans to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. On a visit to Poland, Rishi Sunak said the budget will reach £87 billion by the end of the decade. Addressing troops in a military hangar, he also said the UK defence industry will be put on a war footing. Mr Sunak described it as the biggest strengthening of our national defence in a generation.
As Churchill said in 1934, to urge the preparation of defence is not to insert the imminence of war. On the contrary, if war was imminent, preparations for defence would be too late. I believe we must do more to defend our country, our interests and our values. So today I'm announcing the biggest strengthening of our national defence for a generation. We will increase defence spending to a new baseline of 2.5% of GDP by 2030.
Senior United Nations figures are criticising the government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, warning it sets a worrying precedent. But the Prime Minister is dismissing the concerns, saying nothing will stand in the way of flights getting off the ground. That's after the bill finally passed through Parliament late last night. Well, in the US, Donald Trump is back in court for day 2 of the first criminal trial of a former US president. Prosecutors claim that Mr Trump orchestrated a criminal conspiracy to corrupt the 2016 election. They also argue that payments made to an adult film star, so-called hush money, was in breach of the law. Mr Trump denies any wrongdoing. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Let's take a look at the markets. The pound will buy you $1.2432 and €1.1625. Price of gold is £1,873.67 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,036 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Ray. Now, there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again. I'm Jules Buckley. East Yorkshire firstly, and the Leconfield Road, the A164, just between the Driffield Road roundabout in Beverley and Dray Drive remains closed off. Investigation work continues. That follows a collision from this morning, so we've seen delays. Heading towards Taverham in Norfolk, the Fakenham Road, the A1067, just by Windsor Chase and the roadworks blocked and queuing. There's an obstruction on the road. A northbound M1 just after Bedford at junction 13, a 4-lane stretch of motorway. Lane 1, the inside lane's coned off there. There's a breakdown causing 1 or 2 delays. And the anti-clockwise M25 just around South Mims junction 23. There's been a multi-vehicle collision. 2 lanes currently coned off, and of course that's causing delays. And for now, that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
I wonder, is this the fundamental distinction we need to make between Islam, which is a private religion people may practice freely amongst themselves, and Islamism? When you try and place those values upon other people, place that way of being, force it on people who don't want it.
Tom, I have been very much clear about this thing that Islam is a religion and people are free to follow that religion in the UK, in a free Western society. So we have no problem with people following their religion as long as it is not being imposed onto the wider society. And when you talk about drawing a distinction between Islam and Islamism, people like me, you and me, we are drawing that distinction. We're trying to maintain that distinction. But if you look at the commentator from the Muslim community, some commentator, they would like to blur this line and they would ask you, what is Islamism? Where does it exist? Sorry, it does exist. We see it. And the teacher, this incident is an epitome of that kind of, ideology being prevalent, in our society.
Khadija, do you worry that these views are typical for some sections of society? Do you think that there's a problem with some Muslim men, that they have perhaps views that we don't consider to be British values?
There are certain readings of religion which are misogynistic, which are discriminatory, which are homophobic. We need to be honest about it. We need to be calling it out whenever we hear these kind of views. It's been a long time that we are letting these kind of ideologies crawling in, spreading tentacles in British society, and we are just ignoring it in the name of respecting people's culture and religion. You are not suppressed in the UK.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:37. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, we're not just celebrating St George's Day on GB News today, because it's also a very special day for Prince Louis. Yes, the Prince and Princess of Wales's youngest child, who's fourth in line to the throne, is today celebrating his 6th birthday. I'm joined now by our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, welcome to the show. So, as if St George's Day wasn't enough of a treat, a magnificent photograph has been released to mark the Prince's 6th birthday. Tell us more.
Absolutely. Happy birthday to Prince Louis. Originally, we thought we might not be getting a photograph of the young prince. Traditionally, the Prince and Princess of Wales release a photograph the night before their child's birthday, so the papers can print it on their front pages. That didn't happen. The Prince and Princess of Wales are doing it in their own way, perhaps for a very special reason, or a unique reason, I should say. The photograph itself was taken in Windsor, in the grounds of Windsor Castle, over the last few days by the Prince and by the Princess of Wales. It is also unedited. If you remember back to Mother's Day, the Princess released a photograph of her and her 3 children, which appears to have some small manipulations, but then photo agencies killed the image, which was very embarrassing for Kensington Palace. So that is perhaps why royal sources have made it very clear that this particular photograph of Prince Louis is unedited. And I think the Prince and Princess of Wales really wanted to thank, I understand, the British public, or indeed public around the world, actually, who've been sending their well wishes to Prince Louis on his 6th birthday, wishing him a happy birthday. When the princess revealed her cancer diagnosis, and she is still undergoing preventative chemotherapy, she asked for privacy for her and her family. But it's thought that Prince William and Catherine this morning felt on balance that it was right and they wanted to release a photograph of Prince Louis to thank the public, but they did it on their own terms. They released it on their own social media channels. It wasn't a press release. It was them directly speaking to the public and thanking them for their support.
Cameron Walker, magnificent. I think it's just a quiet act of respectful defiance. Her work was so microanalysed around the world on that Mother's Day photograph, and simply popping this out and refusing to bow to her critics, I think it's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much, Cameron Walker, for sharing this magical moment with us. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has said that Labour is the patriotic party now, and it will celebrate St George's Day with enthusiasm. Well, is that right? Or is he trying to pull the wool over our eyes and make St George's Day a political football? We'll have that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry for most of us through the rest of the day and into tonight. And the best of the sunshine will be to the north and west. That's because we've got a large area of high pressure sat to the northwest of the UK, bringing that drier and brighter weather. In the south and east, though, we've still got this weather front to clear through the next few hours. So risk of some drizzly rain across parts of Kent. Then that will be followed by a northerly wind that should bring some showers, particularly to eastern areas of England, the coastal areas in particular. And that will also bring quite a lot of cloud along these coastal areas. Further north and west, though, it will be a clear night. And here is where it could turn quite cold across parts of rural Scotland. Could be down as low as -4. The frost will be fairly patchy. That does develop, and it should clear quite quickly as the sun does come up quite quickly as well. And it will feel fairly pleasant in the sunshine by the afternoon if you are sheltered from the wind in the north and west, particularly parts of South Wales, southwestern parts of Scotland. We could see temperatures towards the mid-teens. But in the east, it'll be quite a different feel, still similar to how it has been recently. That northerly wind keeping temperatures below double digits for some areas in northeastern areas of England. It'll be a very cold start to Thursday, and then we see an area of low pressure out in the North Sea bring this band of cloud and rain across northern areas of England, parts of Scotland as well. And then it does look like it will turn a little bit more unsettled from the south and west into the weekend, but it turns a little bit warmer.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:44. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, at 4 o'clock, we'll have news of a massive increase in defence spending worth an extra £75 billion over the next 6 years. And you thought we were broke. Now, Scotland's new hate crime law came into effect at the start of the month, on April Fool's Day, of course, and there's still huge controversy over that piece of legislation, with prominent politicians and ordinary members of the public being the victims of vexatious complaints to the cops. Well, GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire has this special report.
Welcome to Scotland, home of Humza Yousaf's hate crime law, aka the Clype's Charter.
Clype, a delightfully Scottish word for a grass, a snitch, or in the context of Russell Finley's opening gambit during the hate crime debate at Holyrood last week, reporting your friends, family and neighbours to the police for alleged hate crimes. The SNP responded by doubling down on the new law's ability to protect vulnerable victims.
I am confident that we have robust legislation that will protect those who are vulnerable to harm.
But other victims are emerging in the wake of this new legislation. As the bill moved through Parliament, concerns rose of police inundated with vexatious complaints, targeting individuals who had committed no crimes. The first fortnight of the new law gave rise to nearly 9,000 complaints.
The vast majority, at least 95%, have been deemed not to be crimes.
False reporting is nothing new. A social post from Scottish Conservative Murdo Fraser was flagged by a trans rights activist in November.
Police decided that no crime had been committed, but nevertheless that was recorded as a non-crime hate incident.
And Alba Westminster leader Neil Hanvey says he too has been targeted under pre-existing legislation.
I've been the victim of at least one of those complaints, and that's taken up the time of police officers.
Thick skin can be expected of our elected officials, but what about the public? 74-year-old Morag McDougall-Brown says she was reported to police by a neighbour, and the experience has taken its toll.
I hate to think that anybody like me or similar to my age would ever have to go through this, because I really don't think I will ever go over it. It's a danger to Scotland. It affects us. It affects our freedom of speech. It's a gagging order.
In spite of everything, Morag is full of praise for the attending officers for swiftly concluding she was no hate monster. The Scottish Government now acknowledges the greater issue of misreporting.
We must send a strong message to those making vexatious complaints to stop doing so.
Complaints dropped 75% in the second week, but logging non-crime hate crime incidents still concerns many, even on the SNP backbenches.
Is it not even more insidious, actually, that you can have a black mark in your name without even knowing about it?
Tony Maguire, GB News.
Now, it's fair to say that the Labour Party has changed massively in the 4 years since Sir Keir Starmer replaced Jeremy Corbyn as Labour's leader. And one of the biggest changes is how Sir Keir has tried to shake off the impression that Labour doesn't like this country. In fact, in the run-up to St George's Day today, he claimed that Labour is the patriotic party now and it will celebrate St George's Day with enthusiasm. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined in our studio by the former Conservative advisor Claire Purcell and the former Labour advisor Matthew Lars. Let's start with you, Matthew. Where does this newfound patriotic streak come from? Is it, pardon my cynicism, just a blatant attempt to drape yourself in the flag to win the red wall? Is it just a cynical use of St George as a political football?
Absolutely not. I think Labour's always been the patriotic party. I mean, I'm not a fan of Jeremy Corbyn's, but he wanted it to be a bank holiday, which we may well come on to discuss. I mean, I think, to be fair, Jeremy Corbyn wanted every day to be a bank holiday in an ideal world. I can remember when Neil Kinnock had the Union flag behind him when I first joined the Labour Party, because I'm that old, hard though it is to believe. So, no, this isn't cynical at all. I think progressive patriotism, making sure that the Union flag and the St George's flag, if you're English, or your flags in the other nations, belongs to all of us, and it's not the property of those on the right of politics, and it should never be as such. So yeah, I'm very pleased that Labour got its St George's Day message up on Twitter, X, first this morning before the Tories, and that's just a sign of the fact that Labour is it. So happy St George's Day to you and everybody watching at home.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Claire. it feels a bit like 1997. It feels a bit like, wrapping yourself in a flag. All that's missing is D-Ream.
Yeah, you see those days that have gone. It's quite interesting, the turnaround in the Labour Party. They couldn't have been less interested previously, but now their leaflets are emblazoned with the union flag, membership cards. You've got Sir Keir Starmer going out there saying how proud to be British. But in the background, you've still got the problems that you had with Jeremy Corbyn, but also Emily Thornberry and her tweet of Rochester, which Matthew and I were discussing, because Rochester, very lovely place down the road from where I live. She couldn't been more sort of snarky as somebody expressing their patriotism that day. So I think that it's a remarkable turnaround. Well, it feels a little bit opportunistic.
Emily Thornberry was sacked from my desk when I was with Ed, and we got back after a visit, and Ed was absolutely incandescent with rage. I actually don't think I saw him as incandescent about that incident because it didn't accord with what he believes. I mean, it was Emily being Emily. Emily sort of slightly tries to sort of take the waspishness to a level too far. She grew up on a council estate in Kent, so it was a very peculiar thing for her to do. But I think we are fundamentally a patriotic party, and so and really interesting. John Denham, who used to be a cabinet minister in the last government, has done an awful lot of work about Labour and Englishness. He's written books about it, and he's done a lot of advising of people that the party needs to, it needs to remember that it needs to stuck up for English interests, because of course at one stage when we had all those legions of Scottish MPs rather than the one we have at present, there was an issue about whether the party was sort of tilted too far towards Scotland. I mean, when I worked before the 2015 election, in between the 2014 Scottish referendum and the 2015 election, do you remember EVIL, English votes for English laws, which was people wrapping themselves in the St George's flag, which the Tories, Cameron did then committed to, but then it kind of died a death during Brexit.
But wasn't there also a little bit of a problem with the Labour Party and leaflets? So the majority of them are going to go out there with a union flag, but then there were some members that are saying they didn't want to do that in case they offended parts of their constituency. So I think the Labour Party really do need to make sure they know what it is they want to be, how they want to present themselves, because you can't have this sort of two-tier system where the union flag might be acceptable somewhere and not other places.
Yeah, I'd say that tends to be white liberal guilt by some of our members in London thinking that, we don't do this. But actually, if you look today at the most patriotic estate in the country, which is this estate in Bermondsey, with pictures of all over the internet where the St George's flag is flying, absolutely in the heart of traditional Labour territory, with a Labour council and a Labour MP, and people from all backgrounds, not just all ethnic backgrounds, but also people from across Europe as well.
And yet, a report out yesterday saying 1/8 of Labour voters think the St George's flag itself is racist.
That might be our Scottish voters taking the mickey in the poll, I thought. Look, there's a small minority of people who call themselves Liberal, who have, and some of them are Labour Party members.
Some of them are Labour Party MPs.
Some maybe one or two
Labour Party ministers.
Who get a little bit like that, because obviously we have seen the St George's flag used by not very nice people. There's a slightly sort of icky demonstration going on in the streets of Westminster outside, and that makes me, the answer to that makes me, cringe as well. But shrug my shoulders, but the answer to that isn't pulling away from this flag. It's being proud, and I'm very pleased to see it flying over St Margaret's Church, right opposite the House of Commons today as I came in, and two women on the bus as I got here looked and was so pleased to see it flying. Claire, it's not been cancelled.
Claire, how much of this is Sir Keir Starmer saying, right, we're going to present ourselves as a patriotic party, and all of you lot who don't like it, keep quiet, because this is how we get elected?
I haven't met them.
Okay. So I wonder what Dawn Butler's opinion on this is. I wonder what Clive Lewis's opinion on this is. I wonder what Diane Abbott's opinion is. I wonder what Jeremy Corbyn's opinion on this is.
He wants the bank holiday.
Well, he wants a day off. He's called it.
But he wants a 4-day working week, let's all be honest.
I wonder how much of this is, and that's why it feels like Blairism. It feels very centrally dictated. We are going to do this. Is there any merit in that, or am I just being a grizzled cynic?
No, I think you're right. We all need to remember this is a general election year, whether we like it or not, and the parties are going to coalesce around certain points that they think are going to win them the most votes. And it does feel, and I'm with you on this, the cynicism that I have is that it's very opportunistic for Labour to say, look at us, we're great, we're going to fly the flag, we want everybody to get round, and anybody that disagrees, just for 24 hours, please be quiet. And I do think there's an awful lot of that. They're just a slightly more organised than the Conservative Party at the moment, who were very late out this morning with their social media, welcome to St George's Day, congratulations everybody, have a lovely day. They were very slow off the mark. So I think that Labour are just more organised in this respect. Let's see how that continues, because the next problem will come up. You've got local elections, you've got all of the rest of the year to get through, so one day is not going to define them.
But we've seen, like, so at our annual conference, we've always had a Scottish and a Welsh night for, you know, eons and eons, and obviously people didn't celebrate English as much anywhere in our society. There's been an English night to go alongside the Scottish and Welsh night for, you know, not just under Starmer, but for some time.
OK, thank you very much. A lively end to the Hour. Claire Purcell, Matthew Lauder, thank you very much for joining us on this patriotic debate on St George's Day. Now, Rishi Sunak has promised an extra £75 billion in defence spending over the next 6 years. He's warned the world is the most dangerous it has been since the end of the Cold War. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll have a full update on that story after this. But first, it's time for your weather, and it's Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry for most of us through the rest of the day and into tonight. And the best of the sunshine will be to the north and west. That's because we've got a large area of high pressure sat to the northwest of the UK, bringing that drier and brighter weather. In the south and east, though, we've still got this weather front to clear through the next few hours. So risk of some drizzly rain across parts of Kent. Then that will be followed by a northerly wind that should bring some showers, particularly to eastern areas of England, the coastal areas in particular. And that will also bring quite a lot of cloud along these coastal areas. Further north and west, though, it will be a clear night. And here is where it could turn quite cold across parts of rural Scotland. Could be down as low as -4. The frost will be fairly patchy. That does develop, and it should clear quite quickly as the sun does come up quite quickly as well. And it will feel fairly pleasant in the sunshine by the afternoon if you are sheltered from the wind in the north and west, particularly parts of South Wales, southwestern parts of Scotland. We could see temperatures towards the mid-teens. But in the east, it'll be quite a different feel, still similar to how it has been recently. That northerly wind keeping temperatures below double digits for some areas in northeastern areas of England. It'll be a very cold start to Thursday, and then we see an area of low pressure out in the North Sea bring this band of cloud and rain across northern areas of England, parts of Scotland as well. And then it does look like it will turn a little bit more unsettled from the south and west into the weekend, but it turns a little bit warmer.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Bedfordshire and the northbound M1 firstly as you make your way up towards Dunstable South and Luton Junction 11. Now currently the inside lanes comed off for breakdowns in the roadworks causing queues back to Junction 10. There was a breakdown around Junction 10 northbound too. That's cleared, but we're still seeing queues. Now the anti-clockwise M25 very slow going towards South Mims this afternoon at Junction 23. 2 lanes shut for a 3-lorry collision currently being recovered. The queue stretches all the way back towards Enfield at Junction 25. A southwest Wales towards Swansea, westbound M4, a lane shut on the exit slip to Llansan at 44 for emergency repairs causing delays. And in mid Wales and Newtown in Powys, the A483 bypass closed both ways for a serious collision there. And that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a happy St George's Day. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, this afternoon's big breaking news. Rishi Sunak has confirmed a huge rise in defence spending, worth an additional £75 billion over the next 6 years. And there's been another tragedy in the Channel as 5 migrants have died, including a 4-year-old child, just hours after Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill was voted through in a late-night Commons showdown. Will we ever stop the boats and put a stop to the human traffickers? And we'll cross live to my home city of Nottingham, where they're celebrating St George's Day in style with that massive flag, the biggest in the entire country. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, the show, always an absolute delight to have your company, especially on this St George's Day. Are you celebrating St George's Day, or have you had the enthusiasm for that trampled out of you? How often have we heard it called divisive, racist, even far right? Well, earlier on in Dartford, GB News rocked up and had a superb time at the carnival. Stephen Dixon and Ellie Costello are there, and we're about to go to Nottingham, my home city, the biggest flag you'll ever set your eyes on, the entire width of the Council House. That's the place where Brian Clough lifted two European Cups, a magnificent sight, a splendid patriotic sight. That's what we want today. I hope you're having a great day. Get in touch, let us know your views on St George's Day, or indeed anything else we're covering today, including that whopping £75 billion extra to defence pledged by Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, a short while ago in Poland. Send your views in a new way. It's gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch. We'll read out a few of those comments before the end of the show. But before all of that, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. 2 minutes past 4, our top stories this hour. Well, on the day that 5 Channel migrants died off the French coast, including a 4-year-old child, GB News can reveal that more than 250 others have crossed to the UK. A small boat got into difficulties off Wimereux Beach earlier near Boulogne. That was before 2 a.m. A number of other migrants were rescued, with at least one now critically ill in hospital. 5 other small boats have now been received by Border Force and the Dover lifeboat, with migrants transported to the processing centre in Dover Harbour. A further 2 small boats are currently in French waters and making steady progress towards UK territorial waters. Well, the Prime Minister has announced plans to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. During a trip to Poland, Rishi Sunak said the budget will reach £87 billion by the end of the decade. Addressing troops in a military hangar, he also said the UK defence industry will be put on a war footing. Mr Sunak described the plans as the biggest strengthening of our national defence in a generation.
As Churchill said in 1934, to urge the preparation of defence is not to insert the imminence of war. On the contrary, if war was imminent, preparations for defence would be too late. I believe we must do more to defend our country, our interests and our values. So today I'm announcing the biggest strengthening of our national defence for a generation. We will increase defence spending to a new baseline of 2.5% of GDP by 2030.
Well, that big announcement comes as Rishi Sunak warned President Putin will not stop at the Polish border if his assault on Ukraine is allowed to continue. Earlier, Britain pledged its largest ever package of aid for Kyiv, worth £500 million. During the Warsaw trip, the Prime Minister is holding talks with the leaders of Poland, Germany and NATO, warning the defence of Ukraine is essential to our joint security. Ukraine's President Zelensky has welcomed that package, which includes long-range missiles, armoured vehicles and boats. Senior figures from the United Nations and the Council of Europe have criticised the government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, warning that it sets a worrying precedent. The Prime Minister says nothing will stand in the way of flights getting off the ground after the bill finally passed through Parliament late last night. But officials at the UN say it breaches the Refugee Convention and seriously hinders the rule of law by reducing the ability of British courts to scrutinise removal decisions. The European Court of Human Rights blocked deportation flights to Rwanda in 2022. Mr Sunak is insisting that won't happen again. The Home Secretary is travelling to Italy for discussions on curbing illegal migration. James Cleverly says the country is one of Britain's most crucial partners in tackling the problem. He'll visit the Coast Guard in Rome and discuss efforts to stem illegal arrivals from North Africa. He'll also become Britain's first government minister to visit Lampedusa, where around 110,000 migrants landed last year. Labour have outlined plans to tackle rural crime. Research shows crime rates are surging faster than in urban areas. The strategy would see increased police patrols with tougher penalties for thefts and antisocial behaviour. The government is dismissing it as a, quote, toothless tweak around the edges. However, Sir Keir Starmer says it'll mean communities will be better protected. Well, in the United States, Donald Trump is back in court for day 2 of the first criminal trial of a former US president. Prosecutors claim Mr Trump orchestrated a criminal conspiracy to corrupt the 2016 election. They also argue that payments made to an adult film star, so-called hush money, was in breach of the law. Mr Trump denies any wrongdoing. However, the trial is affecting his ability to campaign ahead of November's election. And a new photo of Prince Louis has been released by Kensington Palace, marking his 6th birthday. The unedited close-up image shows the young prince lying on a rug on the grass and smiling at the camera. It was taken by his mother at Windsor in the last few days. The family says they're grateful to all those who've wished them well. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, back to Martin.
Thank you, Ray. Now, we start with the huge news that we brought you just over an hour ago, and Rishi Sunak has announced a massive increase in defence spending worth an additional £75 billion over the next 6 years. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. Rishi travelled to Warsaw, 2.5% GDP, big numbers. Will it be enough? That's the big question.
Well, it's never enough, sadly, as far as the armed forces chiefs are concerned. They want more and more, and understandably so. They want the very best of equipment. They want as many men and women as possible to do the many tasks that this government asks of the armed forces. But it will be a significant amount, there's no doubt. It's going to rise defence spending from £64.5 billion at present to £78 billion by 2028, and then to £87 billion by 2030. So effectively, over the next 6 years, we will see an additional £75 billion in defence spending. It's no small amount, and that will help enormously in terms of dealing with what is a black hole in defence spending, with cost overruns on a number of defence projects. Some of that is being brought about by years of very high inflation, which has meant that the cost for the materials that are used to build these very technologically sophisticated defence equipment and ships and tanks and alike are much more expensive than they were. And so, of course, that will be welcomed by the defence chiefs. I think as far as the government was concerned, the position for Rishi Sunak really was becoming unsustainable in terms of not increasing defence spending, given what is happening elsewhere in Europe, where other countries are increasing their defence spending because of what's going on in Ukraine, and also with an eye to the worsening situation in the Middle East. Given that, I think there's no doubt that Rishi Sunak was going to, at some point, have to signal a more definitive rise in a budget rather than the vague commitment to 2.5% of GDP when economic conditions allowed.
And Mark, an additional £500 million, £500 million to Ukraine as well. But Mark, there's another story just breaking now. What can you tell us about the news that has just broken that more than 250 migrants have crossed the Channel today alone?
Yes, and that might not be the last of it. 210 have arrived in Dover so far. In 4 small boats. The first of those arrived mid-morning. One of the boats that arrived was the Dover lifeboat, carrying some of those who were on board that small boat that got into difficulties off the coast of France near Wimereux, which is just north of Boulogne, in which 5 migrants drowned. Well, that boat, remarkably, despite that terrible tragedy unfolding, continued on its way to the UK. Some of those on board, and we understand that there was an unprecedented 112 people on board that boat, absolutely overcrowded to the point where people were falling off and drowning. That boat, with some of those offloaded onto a French vessel, others refusing to get onto that French vessel, then continued to UK waters, where it was picked up by Dover lifeboats and 55 people taken to Dover Harbour. So far where we are, Martin, is 210 people who have now arrived in Dover. In addition to that, I'm told that 2 small boats have now crossed the line. Effectively, they've entered UK waters. They're in the process of being picked up by Border Force. So add to that 210, at least another 100. And in addition to that, there's one more boat in French waters at the moment, but making slow and steady progress towards UK waters. So that could be, again, we could be looking at 300, 350 by the end of today.
Astonishing. Thanks for that update. Over 300 on St George's Day. Will we ever stop the boats? Thank you, Mark White. A comprehensive analysis as ever. And I'm joined in our studio in Westminster by our political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, let's start with the small boats there. Of course, Rwanda last night was meant to be the deterrent. It was meant to be putting an end to this. This will stop the human traffickers. It will break their business model. The morning after is business as normal.
It's an insult, isn't it, to the attempt here by the PM to deal with it. The migrant gangs are thumbing their nose at the PM's efforts. On Thursday, we understand the Safety of Rwanda bill will become legal. The King will give his assent to it. That will mean that the treaty with Rwanda is officially ratified, which means that the authorities in this country can start trying to round up people who arrived here illegally and start the process, the long and laborious and legal process of getting these people onto flights to Rwanda. It's very frustrating for the Prime Minister, but he knows what he's up against.
And there are only a few hundred 150 people who've been identified in Britain before March last year who are considered legally watertight cases to get to Rwanda. 150, that's less than half of what's arrived today.
Well, and before March last year, we're now in April. 13 months ago they've been here. Now, the only way a deterrent works is if you say the next 150 who arrive here are off to Rwanda. That's how you stop the boats coming. You don't say you can wait here 13 months or 12 months or 8 months and then you're off, because that's a long time to get established in this country. So what they want to do, and the problem is the legal wheels that the government wants to get turning won't be fast enough. I've been talking to experts about this, and they want to get the numbers going. We've heard hundreds of judges lined up by the PM to protest them. His political capital is invested in a structure he can't control, which is the legal structure.
And 10 to 12 weeks is the target. It's an ambitious target. Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, today said that Labour would not send a single asylum seeker to Rwanda if it's in power. Clearly, they're going to scrap this even if it gets off the ground. Care for Calais, saying asylum seekers will suffer irreversible harm. And we're yet to see the judicial system grind into action. It seems the entire establishment is stacked against Rishi Sunak.
And if they start taking off in mid to late July, that leaves only a few months before the November election for this rhythm of flights to take off. Earlier we heard from Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary. Here's what she had to say.
The problem with the Rwanda scheme, and bear in mind this was announced 2 years ago. They told us they were implementing this 2 years ago, and they have just kept writing cheques to Rwanda. But the first thing they're going to now do is write another £50 million cheque for Rwanda.
Well, let's continue that conversation now. I'm joined by the human rights lawyer, Shoaib Khan. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. So, the Rwanda bill finally was signed off in the small hours, and yet over 350 more small boat arrivals have arrived today, and that's before the legal system, the lawyers, sets its wheels in action against this plan. As a human rights lawyer, are you licking your lips at stopping the Rwanda plan, about stopping a single flight getting off the ground?
Well, I think those are two completely different things, stopping the bill or stopping the flights, because as we've been saying for years now, well, it's been 2 years, remarkably, the Rwanda bill isn't going to work. With this, there aren't going to be any flights. I still think there aren't going to be any flights. No one's actually going to be on there. As we've seen in the past, we've sent more home secretaries than asylum seekers there. And that's what everyone understands. You know, governments around the world, people around the world, asylum seekers, refugees around the world. If there was any hope, any chance that, you know, people would be sent there, we wouldn't have seen the hundreds who arrived today. I mean, I think, you know, if, you know, that's such an insult, such an offence for this government, if they actually took a sensible stance, if they understood, you know, what's happening. Everyone knows they can't do it, you know, just going by the track record. They say things. Obviously, they're saying even more things this year because it's an election year, but everyone knows it's not going to happen.
Shoaib, it's Chris Hope in the studio here with Martin. Why do you say that no one will get on the flights? Why do you say that these flights will not happen?
Well, mainly because it's the Tories under Rishi Sunak whose plan it is. I mean, we've seen, you know, everything they've been doing. You know, Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, you know, all of these people, everything that, you know, for everything they've been saying, all their rhetoric, all, you know, actually quite hateful things that they've been saying about asylum seekers and immigrants. Have they actually done anything effective? I mean, can you name actually, you know, even one or two policies, even one or two actions that Priti Patel, for instance, or Suella Braverman, which actually reduced numbers? The numbers aren't going down, and we can see that they're just going up. And, you know, we know the only way to change this, and which lots of people have been saying for decades now, not even years, and that's, you know, safe, lawful, legal routes for asylum seekers. If we wanted to prevent these deaths, you know, these tragic, awful deaths this morning, you know, declaring another country to be safe, you know, by the British Parliament isn't the way to do it. The way is we need to provide these people safe routes so they can get to a place of safety. That's the way to stop these deaths.
But the simple fact of the matter is, Shoaib, they're already in a safe country. They're in France.
Well, yes, I mean, but why can't we take our share of those people then? And the point is they're not safe in France because if there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people there, I mean, we know the conditions they live in there. They don't even have housing. They don't have food. They're actually living there, you know, right by, you know, where they're going to be boarding these dinghies or these small boats. That's where they live. That's their life. Are we suggesting that's a safe or decent or humane life for them? No. Obviously, France isn't doing its share. France hasn't been fulfilling its duty. And secondly, I mean, to be honest, why should just France do it? Why should, Greece, Italy, other countries on the borders of Europe be the only countries? The point is we are an island. If we are going to take any asylum seekers, how will they come? Either we send, like we did with Ukraine, like we did with Afghanistan, either we send planes over and bring asylum seekers here, or they're going to come by boat. How else do we ever take any asylum seekers?
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us, human rights lawyer Shub Khan, and also thanks for joining me in studio, our political editor Chris Hope. Fantastic stuff. Now it's the final week to see how your next holiday could be on us here at GB News, with your chance to win a Greek cruise for two, £10,000 in cash and luxury travel gifts. It's a prize worth over £20,000 and it could be yours. Now don't miss out. Here's all the details that you need.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, today we've been covering events to celebrate St George's Day, and the Metropolitan Police has been involved in clashes in central London. GB News viewers can see some of the scenes on your screens now. The Metropolitan Police issued a statement just after 2 o'clock, and it said this: the event is not due to start for an hour, and regrettably, officers are already dealing with disorder. There is an area allocated for this event in Richmond Terrace. This group went past it and continued up Whitehall. When officers formed a cordon and asked the group to turn around, they reacted by violently forcing their way through. Mounted officers intervened with horses to restore the cordon. Well, just an hour later, the police issued another statement, and it read this: Whitehall has reopened to traffic in both directions following an earlier closure to deal with people trying to move away from the allocated event area. There have been no further incidents since that altercation, and there is still a significant police presence. And we're showing live pictures from Whitehall right now. And I'm pleased to say that it looks calm. The police have restored order, and it's a nice, calm scene. We want to see a nice, calm scene on St George's Day. Now, moving on, St George's Day is being celebrated across England today, and we're about to cross live to Nottingham, my home city, where the biggest England flag in the country is in place. Doesn't that make you feel proud to be English? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
So J. Cole, who is a rapper, says that he felt terrible after releasing a song aimed at fellow rapper Kendrick Lamar and vowed to pull the track off streaming services. He said, "I ain't gonna lie to y'all. The past 2 days felt terrible," he told an audience at the Dreamville Festival in North Carolina. "I damn near had a relapse," he said.
There's a lot of young people, especially, that would look at that and they will take it not just as entertainment.
It doesn't happen in any other form of art that I can think of. This is not happening in country music, is it?
Well, it's the same problem in both cases, isn't it? Who's doing the regulating? And surely it's each case on its merits, isn't it? You don't just ban a genre.
Why is there such a lot of hatred for a man who usually would have trash-talked back to stand up and say, you know, this doesn't sit well with me and I love this guy. If we look at, I think his name was Cody Fisher, the semi-professional footballer who died in a club because someone stabbed him. Now, he was stabbed because he stepped on someone's trainers. This is the level of ego we're seeing from a lot of young men who don't have any output of being able to channel that energy, and a lot of it is stemming from cultures like football, hip-hop, these sorts of things. So I'm just saying it's refreshing to see a man who could have easily wiped the floor with his lyrics say, I don't have to. You know?
That is interesting, isn't it? Because I took this interview in the wrong direction. It's not about pointing out the areas of concern. Actually, this story is saying, look, music and art can be giving you an example of how to live a slightly better life.
That's free speech. Saying, sorry. I'm sorry, I choose not to fight back because I love you. It may look like a wimpy thing to do, but it's still free speech.
You know what? I love you, Paul. Sorry about earlier.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:24. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, in case you haven't noticed, today is St George's Day and GB News has been celebrating by broadcasting live from Dartford in Kent throughout the day. And the town hosted a St George's Day parade a little earlier, and early today my GB News colleagues Stephen Dixon and Ellie Costello spoke to the event organiser Govinda Sander.
So we've been organising St George's Day events for about 15 years now here in North Kent. And for me, some of my earliest memories was being racially abused, and growing up, the flag, the Union flag or the St George's flag, was seen as the kind of owned by the far right. So for me, it's about reclaiming the flag for the majority and not the minority. And so we're so proud of what we've achieved here with the St George's Day celebrations.
What does it do for the community? Does it really pull the community together, do you think?
It certainly does. So you'll see today, for example, we've got 15 local schools, all different backgrounds, all different faiths, and that's what it's about, celebrating England in the context of 2024 and celebrating what unites us as communities rather than what divides us.
Why do you think, in a way, the idea of being proud to be English has become associated with, well, I mean, racism, essentially?
Well, growing up, as I said, for me, that's what the association was. So what I'm trying to do, an organisation similar to us up and down the country, is about using St George's Day as a way of bringing communities together, as a sign of positive rather than negative connotations.
In terms of sort of racial tensions here in Dartford, has that eased? I mean, does it really help moving forward?
Well, I would like to say that in terms of this work and the other work we do across Dartford, work with Dartford Borough Council, by bringing communities together, celebrating what unites rather than divides, inevitably a consequence of that will be the fact that it should be easing tensions, and we as a community are celebrating what brings us together rather than what divides us.
And it's about time, isn't it? I mean, right across the country, that we were proud to be English. We can celebrate being English in the way that other nations celebrate their nationality.
I think we can, and if you look at where we are in April, so in April we've celebrated Easter, we've celebrated Vaisakhi, which is a big Sikh festival, we celebrate Eid with the Muslim community, and today we're celebrating St George's Day. That's what it should be about. We are a diverse nation, we're a proud nation, and we should be using opportunities, be it St George's Day, be it Vaisakhi, be it Eid, be it Easter, for us to all to come together.
Lovely stuff. Hats off to Govinda Singh, hats off to Stephen Dixon, hats off to those magnificent Morris dancers in the background there. Now, the good people of Nottingham, my home city, are also marking this special day. And let's head right there now and join our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis. Will, welcome to the show on St George's Day. That flag behind you, the biggest in the entire country, still proudly flying on St George's Day. What's the mood on the ground?
Yes, well, that flag has been up for more than a week now, but still you'll probably see in the background lots of people stopping to take photos. I imagine many of them because they are here to celebrate St George's Day and they want a photo with England's biggest St George's cross on St George's Day. It's not there's no escaping the fact, though, that it is the middle of the week. It's a Tuesday, of course. Lots of people are out working. Their children are at school, so they can't celebrate St George's Day by maybe coming down to the market square. But one of the events that has been organised by the Royal Society of St George, the Radford branch here in Nottingham, is at a nearby pub that's been running for 1,000 years, the Old Salutation, and they host an open party for people of all faiths and backgrounds for the non-political group, the Royal Society of St George. And I've been asking them today, why are they so proud of that flag and celebrating being English?
Well, it's St George's Day, and we always celebrate it on the day. We don't do it the nearest weekend, and we're just proud to be English.
It's all about identity, and if you're patriotic, then today's the day.
We all love England. We're all very proud to be English. We've done this, made me friend, for the last 15, 20 years.
There should be more people come out and celebrate it, but a lot of people go to work on a Tuesday, as it is today.
It just means a lot to be British and just to celebrate St George.
The thing that I've been hearing so often for the last couple of weeks while recording all sorts of stories about St George's Day and the Royal Society of St George is that it is about patriotism. One of the things that I've been told is that so often patriotism is mistaken for nationalism. Nationalism could be described as something that can tear countries apart, whereas, as the Royal Society of St George say, patriotism can bring countries together. And I think that's ultimately what we're seeing today on St George's Day here in Nottingham, as well as across the rest of England.
Oh, that magnificent Council House clock going in the background, Will Hollis, that is the sound of many a night out. I'm loving your patriotic shirt and tie. And as for the salutation, that was on my pub crawl. Started on the Bell, went to the News House, went to the Sally, and then went to the trip to Jerusalem. Will Hollis, magnificent. Thanks for bringing us that patriotic blast from Nottingham. Superb stuff. Now, there's loads more to come between now and 5 o'clock, and I'll talk about the alarming comments from a former Chief Inspector of Prisons who's warned that Britain's jails are a tinderbox that could ignite at any time. In fact, we'll have that former Inspector of Prisons on the show shortly. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Edison.
Thanks, Martin. 4:30, our top stories this hour. Well, on the day that 5 Channel migrants died off the French coast, including a 4-year-old child, GB News can reveal that more than 250 others have crossed to the UK. A small boat got into difficulties off Wimereux Beach near Boulogne before 2 a.m. A number of other migrants were rescued, with at least one now critically ill in hospital. 5 other small boats have now been received by Border Force and the Dover lifeboat, and 2 more are making steady progress towards the UK. The Prime Minister has announced plans to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. During a trip to Poland, Rishi Sunak said the budget will reach £87 billion by the end of the decade. Addressing troops in a military hangar, he also said the UK defence industry will be put on a war footing. Senior figures from the United Nations and the Council of Europe are criticising the government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, warning that it sets a worrying precedent. However, the Prime Minister says nothing will stand in the way of flights getting off the ground. That's after the bill finally passed through Parliament late last night. UN officials say it breaches the Refugee Convention and seriously hinders the rule of law by reducing the ability of British courts to scrutinise removal decisions. And in the US, Donald Trump is back in court for day 2 of the first criminal trial of a former US president. Prosecutors claim that Mr. Trump orchestrated a criminal conspiracy to corrupt the 2016 election. They also argue that payments made to an adult film star, so-called hush money, was in breach of the law. Mr. Trump denies any wrongdoing. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Ray. Now, there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Holmes Chapel in Cheshire and the Knutsford Road. The A50 closed both ways between Needham driving Cranage and Hawthorne Villas in Holmes Chapel, queuing at the scene of a collision. Mid Wales, Newtown in Powys, the Dover Road. The A483 shut both ways near the A489. There's been a serious collision there. Staying in Wales, but South Wales, westbound M4 in Swansea, a lane shut on the exit slip towards Llansamlet at junction 44 for emergency barrier repairs. They're still seeing queues on the cameras anti-clockwise on the M25 this afternoon towards South Mims 23, an earlier bump there. All lanes open, but still slow back towards 25 at Enfield. And the southbound M23, the inside lane shut from the M25 down to Gatwick Airport at 9, slow going. There's a broken down car.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The Princess of Wales is now officially the most popular royal. This is a YouGov poll that found that over 75% of people have a positive view of Princess Catherine, with Prince William only slightly behind his wife at 73%. Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, is here with this one. But what would you read into that, and as to why?
Well, I think it's hardly surprising. Since the start of the year, the Princess of Wales's popularity is up 6 points with the British public, according to this YouGov poll. And obviously, at the start of the year, she went into hospital for abdominal surgery and has subsequently been diagnosed with cancer and is undergoing surgery. Look, the Princess of Wales, since becoming a member of the royal family, has committed no major faux pas. There's been no particular scandal with her. She always puts family first. And I hate the phrase born a commoner, but she wasn't born into aristocracy. She was not born into the royal family. She gave up her old life. And yes, that comes with lots of privilege, being a member of the royal family, but it also comes with enormous challenges, such as everybody prying into your private life, particularly when it comes to your health. And I think the British public are very much on side with that.
Whereas Prince Harry and Meghan continue to be unpopular. 76 compared to 31% having a positive opinion of Prince Harry, and only 26%, 50 points less than Princess Catherine, is Meghan.
Yes, still not looking great for Harry and Meghan. Prince Andrew is far below them as well.
Doing well on negative views, meaning fewer people have negative views about her than anyone else, is the Princess Royal, Princess Anne.
Indeed, yes. The most hard-working royal, if you go by the number of engagements she carries out each year. No nonsense, no fuss. She never gets herself into any kind of arguments or scandals.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:37 on St George's Day. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, there are a couple of worrying stories about the UK's prisons that I'd like to talk to you about now. First, there's a warning from the former Chief Inspector of Prisons that jails are a tinderbox that could ignite at any time. Well, Nick Hardwick says there are too many prisoners and simply too few staff. And it's also been claimed today that there's been a huge rise in the number of female prison guards who are having sex with prisoners. Well, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined now by Nick Hardwick on the show, the former Chief Inspector of Prisons. Nick, a delight to have you on the show. Read your report today in the Times. Very, very concerning, but something that probably won't come as a surprise to you or indeed anybody who's been watching GB News for some time. Quite simply, our jails are filled to bursting point, aren't they?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's not mainly, in fact, a question of the physical space they've got available. It's simply we don't have enough experienced staff for the numbers of prisoners that need to be managed and then hopefully supported so they don't reoffend when they're released. So this isn't just a problem for prisons, it's a problem for all of us, because when these men come out, they're going to be living amongst us. And if we haven't done the work to reduce their risk, then that's a problem for us all.
And Nick, you name check a riot I'm very familiar with. I lived in Manchester at the time, the Strangeways riot. Yeah. Of course, when prisoners broke out and staged a sit-in on the roof. Do you seriously think we're getting towards a Strangeway type riot?
I am more concerned than I've ever been before, because I think to have a riot, you need a combination of things. You need, on the whole, prisoners to have legitimate complaints. You need to have then someone who's a ringleader who can then take advantage of that and mobilize it. And you need staff to make a mistake or not control something quickly when it begins to go wrong. And I think you've got a much greater risk now of all of those three things happening than has been the case for many years. Obviously, I hope very much it won't happen, but I think we need to be alert to the risks. I mean, I can think of an occasion just recently when one of the big prisoners grabbed officers' keys. They got through a security gate and were stopped by an experienced officer rugby tackling them, basically. But that could have gone terribly wrong. And I think there are many other instances where we've come close to stuff getting out of hand. But often, thanks to the bravery of prison officers, we've been able to stop that. But, we should keep everything, fingers crossed, toes crossed, everything crossed that they continue to do that.
And Nick, we spoke with Ian Aitchison a couple of weeks ago on the show. Of course, he was responsible for a big look into extremism within prisons. He said a big issue is the Islamic gangs against other gangs and a feeling that prison wings are being lost in terms of control. Is it now the prisoners who are in control and the wardens who are running afraid?
Well, I think you certainly have some elements of that. I mean, at one level, prisons have always required staff and prisoners themselves to work together to manage. There's always a lot more prisoners than there are staff. And the reason it normally works is that it's in everybody's interest that they stay peaceful. Most prisoners want a quiet life. They want to get on with their sentence, see their family, make a telephone call, all that kind of stuff. And staff generally don't want trouble. And prisoners mainly do, on the whole, want staff to maintain discipline. But when that breaks down, then there is a risk that gangs of whatever type start to have more influence. They start to run things. And then when that happens, and you've got inexperienced staff there, it's very difficult for staff to get control back. Maybe look the other way rather than risk intervening and getting punched or worse.
And Nick, what's the answer? I mean, do we get tougher on the prisoners? Do we clamp down on them? Do we release them earlier and keep the numbers down? We're seeing various measures of that. 60 days early, offenders being let out. Or do we need to build more prisons? But they're not cheap, are they? There's one in Scotland, 210 million quid.
I mean, well, I would say as a society, we need to have a sensible discussion about what we want. I mean, there's a number of ways you could deal with this. The government is spending £4 billion building new prisons. And the Labour Party has said it will do the same. Well, if we're spending £4 billion on prisons, then that's £4 billion less to spend for defence, for instance. So we have to make a choice about priorities. But even so, the problem we've got ourselves into is that the prison population is rising faster than we can build the prisons and faster than we can recruit the staff. So it's a very difficult position. And, you know, I don't think releasing people early, you know, maybe it's the least bad option. It's not desirable at all, because that means that prisoners are being released without any kind of planning, often without accommodation, and then quite often they're being recalled very quickly afterwards. So it is a real mess. I wouldn't want to disguise that.
And Nick, preferential treatment, soft treatment of prisoners, something we talk about a lot. An astonishing report in today's paper, conjugal rights not being performed by prisoners' partners, but by female prison wardens. Why on earth is that allowed to happen? Why is it increasing?
Well, I think I think it's a combination of inexperienced staff. Inevitably, what you've got is some very manipulative prisoners, and you could take advantage. You've got inexperienced staff, and when you have that, in different kinds of way, there's a risk that staff get corrupted, either through relationships or maybe bringing drugs in or whatever. I want to be clear. I think most prison staff do a great job in very, very difficult circumstances. They deal with something that the rest of us would rather forget. But if there's too few of them, if the new recruits haven't got the supervision for more experienced, kind of battle-hardened officers, then there's a risk that things will go wrong, and that's what we're seeing.
And do you think, Nick, an obvious solution to that is to have male-only prison wardens in male-only prisons and vice versa? Get the gender divide back so the temptation simply isn't there?
Well, I don't. Well, the problem with that is there simply aren't enough male officers to do it. I mean, I don't think that. I certainly have seen some excellent female officers, excellent male officers. I think it's much more a question of experience than it is whether a man or a woman.
OK, super stuff. Thanks for joining us. An absolute delight to talk to you and share your expertise. Nick Holbeck, the former Chief Inspector of Prisons. Fascinating stuff. Now, if you're going on holiday to the continent later this year, I'm afraid I've got some very bad news for you, and it's all to do with our old friends at the European Union. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry for most of us through the rest of the day and into tonight. And the best of the sunshine will be to the north and west. That's because we've got a large area of high pressure sat to the northwest of the UK, bringing that drier and brighter weather. In the south and east, though, we've still got this weather front to clear through the next few hours. So risk of some drizzly rain across parts of Kent. Then that will be followed by a northerly wind that should bring some showers, particularly to eastern areas of England, the coastal areas in particular. And that will also bring quite a lot of cloud along these coastal areas. Further north and west, though, it will be a clear night. And here is where it could turn quite cold across parts of rural Scotland. Could be down as low as -4. The frost will be fairly patchy. That does develop, and it should clear quite quickly as the sun does come up quite quickly as well. And it will feel fairly pleasant in the sunshine by the afternoon if you are sheltered from the wind in the north and west, particularly parts of South Wales, southwestern parts of Scotland. We could see temperatures towards the mid-teens. But in the east, it'll be quite a different feel, still similar to how it has been recently. That northerly wind keeping temperatures below double digits for some areas in northeastern areas of England. It'll be a very cold start to Thursday, and then we see an area of low pressure out in the North Sea bring this band of cloud and rain across northern areas of England, parts of Scotland as well. And then it does look like it will turn a little bit more unsettled from the south and west into the weekend, but it turns a little bit warmer.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:48. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now at 5 o'clock I'll have news of a massive increase in defence spending worth an extra £75 billion over the next 6 years. But before that, British holidaymakers face hours of delays when using ferries at Dover or the Eurostar from this autumn. And it's all to do with new EU border rules set to be introduced, which will require people having their fingerprints and their photographs taken as they cross the channel. I'm joined again in the studio by the former Labour advisor Matthew Larser and the former Conservative advisor Claire Purcell. So let's start with you, because I'm assuming you're a huge fan of the European Union.
Well, I'm very sad that we left, but okay. I respect the result.
So what I want to ask you about this is the biometric scanning of data, the capturing of data by the EU. It's being delayed for the Olympics. Monsieur Macron, the president, is getting a pass because we wouldn't want to upset the visitors going to the Olympics, would we? But it's going to kick in Britain in time for the October half-term, more importantly, in time for the general election. Are the EU punishing us?
No, I don't think they're punishing us in terms of the timing it for the election. I just think that's one consequence. I mean, after all, we could have had an election in 2 weeks' time, and it wouldn't have affected it. So, with a general election on the day of the local election. So, no, but I think we're not being punished for leaving the EU. But obviously, I wish we were in the EU. There's a real simple solution to this. If we hadn't left, we wouldn't be doing any of this. Reap what thou sows, or whatever the saying is. I'm about to mess up. And we literally, it's unintended consequences. This is what Brexiteers wanted. They wanted us to be out, and if you're out, then you have to. The EU's got every right to enforce its border controls, and Britain needs to make sure that it does the sensible things. Because the particular issue, as you say, Martin, is when you fly to an airport, you're going to be you'll be fingerprinted, obviously, when you land. But when you get the ferry or you get the Eurostar train, it happens at this side of the channel, and therefore that's where we're expecting queues at St Pancras Station and at Folkestone for the Eurotunnel and at Dover for the ferries.
And they do it in Dover or at Eurostar because of course that's Britain's side, and there's rules about capturing data. But this will no doubt get blamed on Brexit.
But it does feel very much as if the EU do have it in for us. It is a punishment beating to bring this in. They're meant to have an app that is ready so that people can do these things in advance and remotely. And, of course, here we are, not ready. So it's an EU app. We have no control over this, and because they're juxtaposed controls on the Dover side, that's where you're going to get all of those queues filling up. And if you've been to Dover Port, as I have many times, it isn't a very big road system going in. You get lorries, you get people going on holiday, and as you say, this is going to come in time for the October half term, people wanting to get away, and they're going to be stuck for hours and hours in their cars, in their caravans and in their lorries. So, yeah, it's an absolute punishment beating. They could have got this off the ground. They could have got it sorted sooner, or they could have not done it and just continued, as we do, allowing people to come with their passports, using that system that we already have. I'm not sure why they feel the need to take all of our data to harvest that. Who knows where and who knows what they can do.
Well, you can't complain about the EU about having stricter border controls, because we want to take back control of our borders. The EU has the legitimate right to do the same. Now we're not a member. I mean, clearly it's been postponed for the Olympics because Macron has had a word, and as you say, he's got his we from the EU. Yeah. And the Commissioner said they will delay it. But I think overall it's up to the Brits to make sure it runs smoothly on this side of the channel.
OK, well, let's move swiftly on. That's a nice segue into the next story. If only the European Union, and particularly France, could stop people leaving their shores and coming to ours. Today, we've had over 350 and 5 additional tragic deaths.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just the human price is just so extraordinary, and it reminds us why what we ultimately need to do is smash the gangs and have people not coming over the channel. So why Rwanda is a total distraction and a very expensive distraction, but from what we really need to do, which is to have a much more focus on smashing the gangs, to be prepared to work to a new cross-border police force, and as Keir Starmer's number one priority is to use anti-terrorism legislation against those gangs, which Rishi Sunak could do tomorrow, but he refuses to do.
Claire, it's worth saying the morning after the night before, the Rwanda bill was meant to be this huge deterrent to stop people even attempting to get here. This is the worst morning news Rishi could have. Not only the tragedy, but the sheer volume, an additional 350 on St George's Day, the morning after this bill came through. Can we ever stop the boats?
No, is the short answer to this. And it's something that should never have been said, put on a podium, put on a pledge card or whatever. Stopping the boats isn't going to happen. It is virtually impossible to do so. Now, you can reduce the crossings. There is a lot you can do. And France really do need to answer some of those questions as to why they've taken our money and appear to not be doing their job. But having said that, there is also the problem much further up the line coming through Europe and coming from the Middle East. So it is a big problem, but I do think that the French really need to protect their coastline a lot better. They need to look at the gangs that are operating in the areas. They know precisely who they are. The coastline is enormous. I've been there myself. I've seen it. It is very, very difficult to police. But we've given them a lot of money in order to do that, and you would have thought it would have focused some attention. It's also not great for them when you have these deaths occurring in the Channel, because both countries look bad. Both countries will have that on their conscience, and it shouldn't happen.
OK, Claire Purcell, Matthew Laza, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Now, Rishi Sunak has promised an extra £75 billion in defence spending over the next 6 years. He's warned the world is the most dangerous it's ever been. We'll have the full take-up on that. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. But now it's your weather, and it's Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry for most of us through the rest of the day and into tonight. And the best of the sunshine will be to the north and west. That's because we've got a large area of high pressure sat to the northwest of the UK, bringing that drier and brighter weather. In the south and east, though, we've still got this weather front to clear through the next few hours. So risk of some drizzly rain across parts of Kent. Then that will be followed by a northerly wind that should bring some showers, particularly to eastern areas of England, the coastal areas in particular. And that will also bring quite a lot of cloud along these coastal areas. Further north and west, though, it will be a clear night. And here is where it could turn quite cold across parts of rural Scotland. Could be down as low as -4. The frost will be fairly patchy. That does develop, and it should clear quite quickly as the sun does come up quite quickly as well. And it will feel fairly pleasant in the sunshine by the afternoon if you are sheltered from the wind in the north and west, particularly parts of South Wales, southwestern parts of Scotland. We could see temperatures towards the mid-teens. But in the east, it'll be quite a different feel, still similar to how it has been recently. That northerly wind keeping temperatures below double double digits for some areas in northeastern areas of England. It'll be a very cold start to Thursday, and then we see an area of low pressure out in the North Sea bring this band of cloud and rain across northern areas of England, parts of Scotland as well. And then it does look like it will turn a little bit more unsettled from the south and west into the weekend, but it turns a little bit warmer.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The Holmes Chapel in Cheshire firstly, and the Knutsford Road, the A50 remains closed both ways between Hawthorne Villas and Needham Drive in Cranage. It's due to a collision still causing queues, that one. At Redditch in Worcestershire, Alvechurch Highway, the A441. Now that is currently closed both ways between White's Line and Middlehouse Lane. Queuing again, it's due to a collision there. Yardley, Birmingham in the West Midlands, the inbound side of the A45. The Coventry Road is shut between Clay Lane and Swan Island. Again, it's queuing. Again, it's due to a collision. St Paul's Road in Islington and London closed by Highbury Corner to Highbury Grove and queuing. That's due to a collision there. And the southbound M23 from the M25 down to Gatwick Airport at 9, lane 1's combed off. There's a broken down car there. Naturally, it's causing queues. And that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a happy St George's Day. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, this afternoon's big breaking news. Rishi Sunak has confirmed a huge rise in defence spending, worth an additional £75 billion over the next 6 years. Will it be enough? And there's been another tragedy in the Channel as 5 migrants die, including a 4-year-old child, just hours after Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill was voted through in a late-night Commons showdown. Will we ever stop the boats and put a stop to the human traffickers? And a football row has broken out over an independent regulator for the Premier League. One side says it's a big risk. Keir Starmer and the government seem to back it. All of that is coming up in your next hour. Well, welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. The Rwanda bill was passed in the wee small hours after the midnight oil was burned. It was meant to be a deterrent. It was meant to be the clarion call to stop the boats. And yet today alone, 350 migrants and rising have successfully crossed the Channel, and a further 5 have tragically perished in French waters. Will we ever stop the boats? Will Rwanda ever get off the ground? The human rights barrister said to us earlier on in the show they will do their damnedest to stop this. Will it work? Do you have any faith in this bill being the solution to stop those boats? Get in touch. This is your show just as much as mine. There's a new way of contacting us. You can get in touch by visiting gbnews.com/your say. Please get those comments to me and I'll read some out before the end of the show. But now it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. 2 minutes past 5, our top stories. Well, on the day that 5 Channel migrants died off the French coast, including a 4-year-old child, GB News can reveal that more than 250 others have now crossed to the UK. A small boat got into difficulties off Wimereux Beach near Boulogne before 2 a.m. A number of other migrants were rescued, with at least one now critically ill in hospital. 5 other small boats have now been received by Border Force and the Dover lifeboat, with migrants transported to the processing centre in Dover Harbour. A further 2 small boats are currently in French waters and making steady progress towards the United Kingdom. Senior figures from the United Nations and the Council of Europe have criticised the government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, warning that it sets a worrying precedent. The Prime Minister says nothing will stand in the way of flights getting off the ground after the bill finally passed through Parliament late last night. But officials at the UN say it breaches the Refugee Convention and seriously hinders the rule of law by reducing the ability of British courts to scrutinise removal decisions. The European Court of Human Rights blocked deportation flights to Rwanda in 2022. Mr Sunak is insisting that won't happen again. However, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the scheme won't work.
The government has lost control of the borders. But this Rwanda gimmick is not the way to stop it. It cost an absolute fortune, £300 million already, another 50 million either this week or next, to remove a few hundred people. That's a drop in the ocean. To put that into perspective, a week ago Sunday, over 500 crossed the Channel in small boats. That's more than the entire number the government plans to remove in a whole year.
The Prime Minister has announced plans to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. During a trip to Poland, Rishi Sunak said the budget will reach £87 billion by the end of the decade. He was addressing troops in a military hangar where he said the UK defence industry will be put on a war footing. Mr Sunak described the plans as the biggest strengthening of our national defence in a generation.
As Churchill said in 1934, to urge the preparation of defence is not to insert the imminence of war. On the contrary, if war was imminent, preparations for defence would be too late. I believe we must do more to defend our country, our interests and our values. So today I'm announcing the biggest strengthening of our national defence for a generation. We will increase defence spending to a new baseline of 2.5% of GDP by 2030.
Well, that announcement comes as Rishi Sunak warned President Putin will not stop at the Polish border if his assault on Ukraine is allowed to continue. Earlier, Britain pledged its largest ever package of aid for Kyiv, worth £500 million. During the Warsaw trip, the Prime Minister is holding talks with the leaders of Poland, Germany and NATO, and he'll be warning that the defence of Ukraine is essential to our joint security. Ukraine's President Zelensky has welcomed the package, which includes long-range missiles, armoured vehicles and boats. Police were faced with violence at a St George's Day event in Whitehall this afternoon when a group tried to force its way through a cordon. Mounted officers on horses were forced to intervene when the group broke through a police barrier. The force earlier said it expected some, quote, far-right groups and groups linked to football clubs, end quote, to attend the event. The area was closed to traffic while police dealt with the incident. Labour have outlined plans to tackle rural crime. Research shows that crime rates are surging faster in the countryside than in urban areas. The strategy would see increased police patrols with tougher penalties for thefts and antisocial behaviour. The government is dismissing it as a, quote, toothless tweak around the edges. However, Sir Keir Starmer says it'll mean communities will be better protected. In the United States, Donald Trump is back in court for day 2 of the first criminal trial ever of a former US president. Prosecutors claim that Mr. Trump orchestrated a criminal conspiracy to corrupt the 2016 election. They also argue that payments made to an adult film star, so-called hush money, was in breach of the law. Mr. Trump denies any wrongdoing. The trial is affecting his ability to campaign ahead of November's election. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code. It's on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, back to Martin.
Thank you, Ray. And let's start with some breaking news now, following a tragedy in the Channel when 5 migrants died earlier on. And that news is, we're going across the UK. I'm joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, a tragic incident in the early hours. You have an update. What's the latest?
Yeah, we've learned that French authorities are investigating whether a group, we believe, of African migrants who stormed that small boat as it was launching on that beach from Wimereux, just north of Boulogne, early this morning, may have contributed to this tragedy. We understand that a group of migrants who effectively haven't paid for their voyage tried to clamber on board the already crowded vessel. It was interesting because some of the earlier reports we were getting spoke of 112 people on a boat. I've never known a small boat, even though they've increased in size over the years, to hold 112 people. That was clearly very dangerously overcrowded. It's believed to have come aground on a sandbank, freed itself because of the number of people on board that vessel. Multiple people fell off and ended up in the water. Now, this tactic, this phenomenon of groups of migrants trying to storm these boats is growing. It's an increasingly common tactic used particularly by African migrants, we're told, who do not have often the money to pay the people smugglers the thousands of pounds for that voyage across the English Channel. And the tactic is effectively, as the migrants, 40, 50 odd, are pushing their boat into the sea to head out towards the UK, then you get a group of these other migrants. They can number up to 20 who just rush the boat and fight their way on, really. They come up against some of the gangmasters, the people smugglers, who are obviously there at that time as well. There have been reports over recent months of migrants being stabbed in clashes with people smugglers, some that have actually been fatally stabbed. So an indication, I think, really of the growing levels of violence and chaos in the desperation there to get across the Channel, the clashes with the people smugglers who do not want people to get that voyage for free in what is an increasingly lucrative business for them. And now we're told French authorities looking into whether a group of migrants that rushed towards that boat, that clambered on board it, increased just how dangerously overloaded the boat was, whether that may well have led to this tragedy that we saw this morning.
Mark White, the Rwanda bill was passed late last night. It was meant to be the deterrent. It was meant to be a full point to this. The picture you're painting, Mark, though, however, is the exact opposite. Terrible news for the Prime Minister, this tragedy, and further proof of an increasingly lawless situation on the French beaches.
There's no doubt it absolutely is. The French police are coming under regular attacks in clashes with migrants. So as well as migrants fighting amongst themselves and fighting in particular with those criminal gangs, you've got the police who are trying to intervene to puncture the boats to stop them getting into the water, who are being pelted with bottles and sticks and other objects. In fact, there was an incident just near Boulogne, again near the site of this tragedy actually, a few weeks back, where police were attacked by a large group of migrants who actually poured some of the petrol they use to fuel their boats going across the channel. They poured that petrol across the beach to stop the police advancing towards their boat and set it on alight. A number of police officers have been injured in these clashes in recent weeks, but still the boats keep coming, Martin. And today, again, we brought you the news that now it looks like we're seeing possibly 350. I can confirm that so far 320 have now crossed. That's gone up a little bit since the last time we spoke. Another boat, though, is still heading towards the UK waters, to that demarcation point into UK waters. It's not far off, so when that arrives, it's probably going to be well in excess of 350, maybe 370 who've crossed today.
Okay, thank you, Mark Wyatt, for that update on the tragedy earlier on in the channel. Excellent. Now, lots more on the migrant crisis a little later this hour, but now to a huge increase in defence spending announced by the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak this afternoon. The Prime Minister says it will go up by an astonishing £75 billion in the next 6 years. And he's warned the world is the most dangerous it has been since the end of the Cold War. Well, Mark Wyatt is still with us. Mark, £75 billion and rising. A few people wanted more. Grant Shapps promised 5%, hinted at that, 2.5% until 2030. Will it be enough?
Yeah, I don't think Grant Shapps ever thought he was going to get 3% of GDP, but clearly the position was increasingly unsustainable for Rishi Sunak to talk in vague terms about an aspiration to reach 2.5% of GDP for defence spending when economic circumstances allow. You only need to look around the world to the potential global threats out there. Russia and China, Iran, they're all spending huge amounts on their defence and causing, as far as the West is concerned, an increasing threat. And then to meet that, you see other European countries like Germany, for instance, which has always had, in recent decades, a fairly woeful level of defence spending, has really significantly increased its defence spending to response mainly to the threat, of course, from Ukraine. So Rishi Sunak now saying that what we will get from the £64 billion annually now is 78 billion by 2028 and then up to 87 billion by 2030. That will be welcomed by the armed forces chiefs. It will go a long way to helping fill that black hole that has been ever growing over the years in defence spending. It will help them at a time, of course, when we know ships are being disposed of and laid up. There is not enough people coming forward to join up to the Navy, the Royal Fleet Auxiliary that supports the Navy because of pay and conditions. The Army has shrunk. Equipment is just not getting through quickly enough. It will help. It's never enough, but I think it will be very welcome amongst the generals.
Excellent stuff, Mark Wyatt. In fact, let's find out now, because I'm joined by Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mail, who's a former Army General and the former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff. Welcome to the show, Sir Simon. So, 87 billion by 2030, which makes the UK the second biggest NATO contributor. Is that enough, in your opinion?
Well, I think, as Mark said, I think, what's enough when you're trying to deter? And Rishi Sunak certainly made the case that money well spent in advance is money saved later on. The cost of fighting wars is quite horrendous. I would say better late than never. It's always going to be a question of how we spend it. We've been notoriously bad at spending our money on big ticket items. It will certainly encourage the Americans. Part of this is making sure that the sort of noises we heard from Obama and Trump about, if you're not prepared to shoulder your part of the deal, we're going to put out, and it'll certainly help other people make the political statement that they're going to improve spending. So this is about national sovereign capabilities, but it's also about NATO collectively rising to meet the challenge. And you referred to Germany earlier on.
And so, Simon, it's also about another bumper giveaway to Ukraine, because as well as pledging $75 billion to domestic defence, also an additional £500 million, £500 million today pledged to Ukraine, 4 million rounds of ammo, 400 vehicles, 60 boats. Is that money necessary? Can we afford it, or can we simply not afford to keep donating to Ukraine?
Well, the fact of life, Martin, is, since the end of the Cold War, we've taken a huge peace dividend, and we've basically secured our prosperity on the back of the generosity of the American taxpayer. We've committed to the NHS, we've committed to the welfare state, we've got, frankly, too many civil servants, and the consequence of the failure of deterrence is huge. To be honest with you, some of that money that's been pledged, of course, is to replenish stocks of ammunition and missiles that we have given to the Ukrainians. I think that was the right thing to do. So some of it is money that, frankly, should be handed over anyway. But to be honest with you, at this moment, it's definitely the right thing to do. It's very encouraging. We should have been doing this, I would argue, several years earlier. But if it locks the Americans in and encourages other NATO nations to do their bit as well, then it will be money extremely well spent.
And so, Simon, to finish here, Rishi Sunak said that our defence is now on a war footing. Should we be concerned about Britain getting dragged into a wider war across not only Europe, but also perhaps in the Middle East?
Well, the Middle East, it would be a national decision. We've got to remember Article 5 of the NATO Charter does commit us, all for one and one for all type thing. An attack on one is an attack on all. So in many ways, if there is an attack on the Baltics or Poland or any other NATO nation, then technically we are committed anyway. The key, as Rishi did say, was deterrence is a much better effective use of money than fighting a war. They are hugely expensive, as we're seeing in trying to keep the Ukrainians in the fight against Russia.
OK, well, thanks for joining us on the show and giving us your expert insight. Lieutenant General Sir Simon Maile, who's a former Army General and the former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff. Now, get lots more on that huge story on our website. And thanks to you, GBNews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got breaking news and all of the brilliant analysis that you've come to expect from us here at GB News. Now it's the final week to see how your next holiday could be on us here at GB News, with your chance to win a Greek cruise for two, £10,000 in cash, and also luxury travel gifts. It's a prize worth over £20,000 and it could be yours. Don't miss out. And here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Still to come, tragedy in the Channel as 5 died trying to cross into the UK, and it came just hours after the Prime Minister's Rwanda bill was passed. Will the boats ever be stopped? We'll discuss that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The perception of a crime being committed is not based on whether that person intended to commit a crime or not, but whether the victim, in inverted commas, or anybody else for that matter who happened to hear whatever was said, determines that it was motivated by malice or ill will. Most of these things come out in heated exchanges or in, very casual exchanges. And then somebody says, oh, I'm offended or I'm hurt or I'm whatever because this was clearly malicious and it's against me as a black person or a transgender or sexuality, whatever it might be. And somebody says, I perceive this to be motivated by hate. Now, at that point, what is the reasonable test that anybody could apply as to what was in somebody's mind at the time? You don't know what I'm thinking now. I don't know what you're thinking now. Why is it that a crime can be committed on the basis of what somebody is alleged to be thinking?
Well, that's also how discrimination often works, because people have worked out these days that saying something or sending an email like one I received some years ago that said, let's go round her place with pickaxe handles and balaclavas and see what we can do. Now, that's an email that was sent about me. People have worked out that you don't do that. But from the circumstance of what happens, if racial taunts were being shouted, if taunts about someone's protected characteristic were being shouted in the run-up to what then happened, it would be pretty obvious that that was a hate crime.
But we know, for example, that street preachers have been arrested merely for quoting the Bible and without actually intending, anything beyond that.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:24 and a happy St George's Day to you. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, on the day that 5 Channel migrants died off the French coast, GB News can reveal that more than 300 others have now crossed to the UK. The tragedy early this morning happened just a matter of hours after the Rwanda law cleared Parliament. And I'm joined now in our Westminster studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, a terrible tragedy for the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to wake up to. The Rwanda bill was meant to be the beginning of the end. It was meant to be the deterrent. And yet today, over 300 now, approaching 350, including another tragedy in the Channel. Has the good news of that been overwhelmed by what's happened today?
Essentially, 2 plane loads have arrived here. Now, 150 or so on each plane meant to be flying to Rwanda. Yeah. That's the rhythm of these flights taking off for Kigali, maybe from mid to late July. And look at the numbers coming across already. And we're talking about numbers who have been in this country for 13 months waiting to go on the first flight out. So what the PM should be saying, if he could have control of this policy properly, is anyone arriving from today will go straight to Kigali. He can't do that because of the legal process, and then each case will be challenged. Each individual case will have a case to prove that whether they'll be OK and allowed to go to Rwanda, and that's why Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, resigned over this whole thing. The idea of individual challenges will just tie it in red tape like the giant in Lilliput, tied down by little bits of string. Very, very difficult. What happens next, though, is on Thursday, this should become law. It should get royal assent by the King, and that will trigger letters going out, the rounding up of people who may go on these first flights in 10 or 12 weeks' time. That's 3 months away. This was an emergency legislation announced by the PM last November. First flights don't take off until July, very near to when the next election will be.
And yet, we had a human rights barrister on the show earlier saying they're licking their lips. They'll do everything they can to ground the flights. And, of course, Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, today saying that the Labour Party won't allow a single person to leave for Rwanda. They'll scrap the plan.
Yes, she's not averse, though, to offshore processing. She said if something works, we'll look at it, but it's not the Rwanda plan. The Rwanda plan is a deportation plan. Offshore processing, maybe in Albania or somewhere else, like Germany, looking at this idea. They could come back to Germany once they're processed, but this is a deportation plan. That's what they were against.
And we spoke to Yvette Cooper. Let's see what she has to say.
The problem with the Rwanda scheme, and bear in mind this is there was announced 2 years ago. They told us they were implementing this 2 years ago, and they have just kept writing cheques to Rwanda. But the first thing they're going to now do is write another £50 million cheque for Rwanda.
And let's cross now to the Rwandan capital of Kigali and speak to Adam Bradford, who's a British citizen who now lives in the East African country. Welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, Adam. So the bill has finally been passed. It's finally law. They'll do all they can to try and stop the flights going. But Adam, what do you make of it? I mean, you've been singing the praises of Rwanda on GB News for many, many months.
Yeah, and rightly so, Martin, because it's a safe country and there's never been a problem with it. I think actually we are the country of blaming everybody else. 8 years ago, we decided that Brexit was the solution to the immigration problem. Then we decided that that didn't work. And, frankly, even though I'm not going to cast my own opinion, I think it was stupid. And then now we're blaming Rwanda and talking about the safety of Rwanda and whether this will work and that will work and how much it costs. Well, at the end of the day, this immigration problem is not Rwanda's problem. It's doing its best to help. So I am very happy that it's passed today. And so it should have 2 years ago.
Adam, it's Chris Hope in the studio here with Martin. What is the process like in Rwanda? Can you speak out against the government? Is it quite difficult to do that? Some people say there are various human rights issues with the country, which is overlooked by this country.
I think, unfortunately, what those people are saying is complete nonsense. It's completely misinformed. Yes, they're right to point out that 30 years ago, there was a genocide here, but the country has rebuilt itself. The governance is strong, and it's perhaps, to some people's view, more strict because people are very polite and don't put their head above the parapet here because they trust the government to do the right thing by them. That's something we probably don't always get from our government. But what I'm trying to say is there's no regime. There's no regime in Rwanda at all. It's a secure place. Of course, being in the location that it is, it's had to take hundreds of thousands of refugees, some from DR Congo, some from Libya and other countries. It's used to taking people in. There's no problem with it. I just wish the people who were criticising the country had actually been here and don't have a vested interest in one thing or another. That's what's annoyed me the whole time in this debate. It's never come from a place of real facts.
Yeah, Adam Bradford, thank you very much for joining us live from Kigali. And you've been saying for a long time there are great economic opportunities in the country if you're prepared to work. And in fact, Adam has said that the accommodation that's being offered is fantastic. In fact, so much so that 70% of it has now been leased to locals. It's not even available anymore. It's very desirable. Adam Bradford lives there. It's great to get a voice from the ground. Now we're going to move on now because there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, and I'll tell you how people across England have celebrated St George's Day. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. It's 5:30, our top stories. On the day that 5 Channel migrants died off the French coast, including a 4-year-old child, GB News can reveal that more than 250 others have now crossed to the United Kingdom. A small boat got into difficulties off Wimereux Beach near Boulogne before 2 a.m. A number of other migrants were rescued, with at least one now critically ill in hospital. 5 other small boats have now been received by Border Force and the Dover lifeboat. A further 2 are making their way to the UK. The Prime Minister has announced plans to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. During a trip to Poland, Rishi Sunak said the budget will reach £87 billion by the end of the decade. Addressing troops in a military hangar, he also said the UK defence industry will be put on a war footing. Well, police were faced with violence at a St George's Day event in Whitehall this afternoon when a group tried to force its way through a cordon. Mounted officers on horses needed to intervene when the group broke through a police barrier. The force earlier said it expected some, quote, far-right groups and groups linked to football clubs, end quote, to attend the event. The area was closed to traffic while police dealt with the incident. And in the US, the judge overseeing Donald Trump's so-called hush money trial warned that his lawyer was losing all credibility by claiming that he didn't violate a gag order. The order was intended to prevent the former president from criticising witnesses. His lawyers claim that comments he's made publicly were simply responses to what they're calling political attacks. But the judge said that argument was without any evidence. The ongoing trial is affecting Mr. Trump's ability to campaign ahead of November's election. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Let's take a look at the markets. The pound will buy you $1.2442 and 1.1630 euros. Price of gold, £1,869 and 69 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed the day at 8,044 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Ray. Now, there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner with the latest. Long queues up in Lancashire for the M6. The northbound carriageway of the motorway remains shut. Junction 32 to 33 between the M5 and the Lancaster South exit. A police investigation is underway. Long queues back to Junction 31 and back along the M55 as you divert. In Worcestershire, Redditch, the A441 Alvechurch Highway, that's still closed both ways at the scene of a serious accident. On the Kent stretch of the M25, the motorway is blocked clockwise just after the M26, the Sevenoaks exit. A car has broken down, and in Somerset, the A361, that's Main Road, that is closed just to the northeast of Taunton at East Link, all down to an accident. Onto public transport, and no service for Tyne Weir. This is the trams between Pelaw and Jarrow. A tram has broken down. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
SUV drivers in Oxford will face higher parking charges. Proposals tabled by the local Green Party or passed by the City Council. The motion argues that heavier cars like SUVs cause more damage to roads, are more likely to seriously injure or kill pedestrians, and cause more illnesses due to pollution. However, the Alliance of British Drivers has condemned the plan as absolutely outrageous. Well, let's get the thoughts now of the legendary motoring journalist, Quentin Wilson. Quentin, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. We hear a lot about the war on motorists, this time targeting SUVs because of their weight, and the charges could be astronomical. This idea first started in Paris. Now it's come into Oxford. Can you tell us a bit about how it would work?
OK, so the idea is that the charges will penalise people who drive heavier SUVs, and I guess by implication electric cars, although Oxford Council haven't said exactly what they're going to do with EVs. But this is all based around this notion of SUVs being heavier than passenger cars, therefore wearing out the roads more. Now, there was a study, I've got it here in front of me, from the University of Edinburgh in 2022 that said real-world tests found that overwhelmingly the wear is caused by large vehicles, buses, heavy good vehicles. Road wear from cars and motorcycles is so low that this is immaterial. Now, obviously, driving around a medieval city like Oxford in an SUV isn't the brightest thing in the world to do. But the idea that we should penalise the owners of these cars based on imperfect science that's been read on social media, I think is completely wrong.
Welcome back. It's 5:37. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. You've been sending your comments in, your says, and I'd like to read them a few out because what's got you going is the St George's Day March presently happening near Trafalgar Square. There's been an altercation between the police and some marchers there, and Jack says this: why do the police always refer to people who march on these kind of marches far right? And why do they always seem to get stuck straight into them, yet they stand off the pro-Palestine marchers every day on a Saturday? To me, this looks like clear two-tiered policing. Well, joining me now is Michelle Juby, my favourite part of the day, especially on St George's Day. Jubes, look at that, resplendent in red and white for the day itself. What's on your menu?
Well, I was going to come dressed up in some kind of St George flag, but I thought, do you know what, I'll keep it classy for once in my life. I want to pick up on that conversation you've just been having, though, because surely it is two-tier policing, Martin. Why on earth did the police feel the need to kettle these people? And I don't recall them branding people names and insults before an event takes place. Far right this, football hooligan that. What on earth is going on? So of course I want to explore that as well. But I want to look as well. Public toilets. You know, I was going to poo-poo doing this as a story, right? But so many people have got in touch saying that they care passionately about the lack of public toilets. Apparently, it's very discriminatory against the elderly in society. So I want to ask, do we need more public toilets? And also, what caught my eye, Martin, in Birmingham, there's an estate that's created this, like, code of conduct, if you like, a neighbourhood code. It's 30-odd pages of do's and don'ts. And I wonder, do you think we need a bit more of that in society? A few more boundaries around people? Or not?
Yeah, I think we do. And I think a great person to enforce them, put the fear of God in them and make sure they follow the rules would be Michelle Juby. 6 till 7.
Imagine me in Neighbourhood Watch. I get kicked straight out.
I think you'd be great at it. They'd be terrified of you in a good way. Jubes & Co, 6 till 7 on this St George's Day evening. The queen of primetime political debate. Superb. Now, a row's broken out in the football world over an independent regulator. The Premier League has warned it poses significant risks of undermining the league's global success. But the Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, says well-run clubs have nothing to fear, and Sir Keir Starmer appears to have backed the government's plans. Now, it comes after lower league clubs slammed the decision to scrap FA Cup replays, saying it favoured the elite and was yet another blow to those with smaller budgets. Well, I'm joined now by the legendary football writer Harry Harris. Harry, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure, especially on St George's Day. More fans in control, more people power. What could go wrong?
Well, what could go wrong is whether the independent regulator, the government, are the right people in place to implement what is right for the game. Of course, you know, what is wrong for the game is this blatant self-interest completely ignoring the wishes of the fans, completely ignoring the finances of lower league clubs. It's just appalling. It's really just an elitist view about the national sport that doesn't reflect what the entire country would like to see from its football.
Yeah, Harry, there is definitely a feeling. I mean, I'm a Nottingham Forest fan. Don't get me started on the 3 blatant penalties we should have had against Everton at the weekend. But VAR seems to favour the bigger clubs. The FA Cup replays being scrapped due to fixture congestion favours the bigger clubs. They've got loads of players. They can rotate their squads. Is there a feeling, Harry, that the entire game now is simply dictated by money and it's the big clubs that call the shots and the smaller clubs, they can go to hell?
Correct. I couldn't put it better. I mean, if the Premier League had their way, I mean, they're sidelining the FA. They're making them. It's an embarrassment the way they're dictating the game. You go back a few years, when I was a chief football writer of the Daily Mirror, we campaigned vigorously to halt the Premier League in taking a game or two, however many games they wanted to, somewhere else around the world. Who cares about the fans being able to get there? They're not interested. But you put your finger on it now. It's the first time that a contract for overseas rights is bigger than the domestic contract. And the Premier League will go to any lengths at all to protect the kind of football, the kind of brand that they're putting out around the world. So it doesn't really matter what happens outside of that Premier League elite. They're not interested.
And Harry, presumably, we both know the answer to this, the last thing the Premier League want, the last thing the big clubs want are disruptive fans, gobby fans inside boardrooms actually speaking the voice of the terraces. They're not interested in that.
No, they're not interested in that. And for years there's been some kind of mechanism. How do you get fans involved? How would they be able to influence certain decisions? Well, that's never going to happen. You could have nominee fans on a board, but they're taking no notice of them. They have no equity stake in the companies. But of course, this independent regulator, for me, will it have some teeth? Will it actually do something? Because we've seen, I have down the years, many decades, all of these kind of commissions, they end up doing nothing because they don't have real teeth. Does the government really have the appetite to implement some of the things they want to? I doubt it. Would a Labour government be better? Yes, they would. So I've got a lot of hope in an independent regulator and his team. But so far, we haven't seen too much on that independent regulator's team that I would say would have the knowledge to bring into reality some of the things we want to see.
OK, Harry Harris, thank you for your input on this St George's Day, and I've always very much enjoyed your writing over the years. Great to talk to you, Harry Harris. Superb. Now, still to come, how a surge in council house tenants' unpaid rent is costing us taxpayers an astonishing £500 million a year. What on earth can we do to clamp down on that? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry for most of us through the rest of the day and into tonight. And the best of the sunshine will be to the north and west. That's because we've got a large area of high pressure sat to the northwest of the UK, bringing that drier and brighter weather. In the south and east, though, we've still got this weather front to clear through the next few hours. So risk of some drizzly rain across parts of Kent. Then that will be followed by a northerly wind that should bring some showers, particularly to eastern areas of England, the coastal areas in particular. And that will also bring quite a lot of cloud along these coastal areas. Further north and west, though, it will be a clear night. And here is where it could turn quite cold across parts of rural Scotland. Could be down as low as -4. The frost will be fairly patchy. That does develop, and it should clear quite quickly as the sun does come up quite quickly as well. And it will feel fairly pleasant in the sunshine by the afternoon if you are sheltered from the wind in the north and west, particularly parts of South Wales, southwestern parts of Scotland. We could see temperatures towards the mid-teens. But in the east, it'll be quite a different feel, still similar to how it has been recently. That northerly wind keeping temperatures below double digits for some areas in northeastern areas of England.
It'll be a very cold start to Thursday, and then we see an area of low pressure out in the North Sea bring this band of cloud and rain across northern areas of England, parts of Scotland as well. And then it does look like it will turn a little bit more unsettled from the south and west into the weekend, but it turns a little bit warmer.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:47. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, in case you haven't noticed, today is St George's Day, and GB News has been celebrating by broadcasting live from Dartford in Kent throughout the day. Earlier on, the town hosted a St George's Day parade a little earlier, as Ellie Costello reports.
Yes, happy St George's Day to you. We are in the Bull and Bick in Dartford today. Dartford, of course, being in Kent, the Garden of England. And you can see this fantastic bar behind us here, covered in the Union Jacks. It is the perfect place to be on St George's Day. So I've got my soft drinks. There's no drinking on the job. And I thought I'd introduce you to two very loyal GB News viewers who are here celebrating St George's Day. Colin and Hayley, wonderful to be with you today. And Colin, this is part of your tradition, isn't it, on St George's Day?
Every St George's Day, always has been, always will be.
Talk me through the day.
Full English in the morning, bath, and then out, enjoying the atmosphere.
Wonderful. So what time did you have your first pint this morning?
It was about 10:30.
Now that is pretty good going. Pretty good going. And how's the rest of the day look? You're just going to be in the pub celebrating the day?
Yeah, I'll give it another hour and a half and then go and put my feet up. Getting old now.
So why is St George's Day so special to you? Why do you want to celebrate it?
Well, it's our, you know, if you can't have this day, right, for yourself or your English pride, what day can you have? You know, why do you have to, you know, try and hide your identity on one day? Like, you're not allowed to do it throughout the year, but now the time has come. Today, April the 23rd, is our day, and we will celebrate it, and that is it.
And you feel really passionately about that?
Of course I do. Yeah, I'm English. I love my country. So, you know, like, why shouldn't I celebrate on the one day that I'm allowed to celebrate it without being persecuted? It's a no-brainer.
What do you love about being English?
Well, just my family orientation, yeah, the way that we stick together as a family, right? Because English people, right, should stick together like Pakistani people, like Hindu people, like whoever you are, whoever you identify as, right, you should be able to stick together and be that way. And if people are trying to take that away from you, then they need to be stopped.
And you,
simple as that.
yeah, and you were saying earlier you just love English food as well, and the football, and all these things that mean, yeah, quintessentially English things you're very proud of.
Yeah, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. Why shouldn't I be proud to be English? There's nothing wrong in being proud to be English.
And Hayley, how's your day been so far? I hear that you were up very early putting up a flag this morning, a St George's flag.
I had to get my steps out and climb up, and he was inside opening the window, so yeah. But watching GB News, you do get quite patriotic when you see how everyone else is celebrating, and then you realise, you know, people are passionate.
Well, do indulge me then. So you are very big fans of GB News.
Massively. Day dot. First day that you went out, I was watching, and I have done every day since.
Oh, well, that is just wonderful to hear. Colin and Hayley, thank you so much. Enjoy your celebrations, enjoy the parade, enjoy the drinking, dare I say. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. As you can see, it's going to be a really exciting day here in Dartford, packed with events, local communities coming together, including lots of school children, 700 school children across 24 schools coming together to celebrate everything it means to be English.
Colin and Hayley, absolute legends. Thank you so much. Since day one on GB News, thank you so much. I'll raise a glass to you later on. Absolutely legendary there in Dartford. Superb as well from Ellie Costello. Now, moving swiftly onwards, there's been a surge in council house tenants' unpaid rent. New government figures show arrears have doubled, costing taxpayers an astonishing £500 million. Well, I'm joined again in the studio by the former Labour advisor Matthew Larser and the former Conservative advisor Claire Purcell. Claire, let's start with you. £500 million in rent arrears. Should we evict them?
Well, I think you have to look at yes as the answer to this, because it's been going on for quite some time. You delve down into the figures, and this are people who haven't paid it for months and months, and in some cases years. So the council has just let that run. People are just assuming they don't have to pay. Now, if I stop paying my mortgage, my house would be taken back by the bank, and quite rightly so. They lent me the money under the proviso that I would pay it back. So it has to be the same way. If you're in a private rental and you don't pay, your landlord would evict you. Why should social housing be any different?
Matthew?
So fundamentally, people should pay, but one of the problems is that the universal credit was introduced, which meant that rather than money going straight to the social housing provider, the council, it goes via the tenant has to pay their rent, and what's obviously to make sure people were budgeting more responsibly. I think that perhaps with COVID as well, people didn't get into the habit of doing that. But yes, councils need to reclaim the money. The worst offender, from the figures that I've looked at, is the Tory council in Welwyn Hatfield, 100,000 people, over £2 million owing, whereas bigger councils like Birmingham, which is 10 times as much, has got less owing. But they all need to make more effort to collect this money.
So how do they collect the rent if they say, well, I haven't got the money, and if you evict me, I'll be homeless?
Yeah, and the problem, of course, is then the council has a statutory duty to house them if they're homeless. So it's difficult, because what you used to be able to do is when it was paid direct, obviously you could get your money directly. This is the problem. One of the problems of universal credit has been that it's a big transition for people who were used to, to having their rent paid directly, having to pay it themselves.
But you do have to take some personal responsibility.
Absolutely.
People have to learn to pay their bills on time. We all have to do that.
And isn't that the point? If they know they can't get evicted because they know a council won't make them homeless, just think, well, I'll put my feet up and just let the taxpayer cough up.
Where's the incentive to actually take responsibility at that point if you know that you're always going to be picked up after? And I think that's what we need to stop.
Some councils will evict people. I mean, they're particularly strong on antisocial behaviour, and they evict people for that. So I think it's time for councils to get tough. Now, with the pandemic's a wee way down the history track. So let's get this enforced, because even if it doesn't solve councils' problems, it sends out to people who are paying increased council tax a bad message that not everybody's paying their share.
Superb. Matthew Larser and Claire Purcell.
Thank you.
Absolutely splendid debate today. Thank you very much for joining us on today, St George's Day. And it's quite nice to hear that you, a lefty, actually are feeling the vibe.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to go have a pint of an English ale this evening.
Well, like a nice San Miguel. Oh! Well, thank you very much. Now, that's all from me for now. And as you know, Jubes & Co. is up next, 6 till 7 p.m. with Michelle Jubilee, the queen of primetime political debate. Don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's breakfast with Eamon and Isabel, followed, of course, by Britain's Newsroom, 9:30. And then all the drama with PMQs. That's Chris Hope and Gloria De Piero in this studio. Then live at midday, it's Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain. It's actually 1 till 3 on a PMQ's day. Now, I'll be back at 3 p.m. tomorrow. I've been Martin Daubney. Thanks for joining me on GB News. Happy St George's Day. First your weather, and it's Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar. sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry for most of us through the rest of the day and into tonight. And the best of the sunshine will be to the north and west. That's because we've got a large area of high pressure sat to the northwest of the UK, bringing that drier and brighter weather. In the south and east, though, we've still got this weather front to clear through the next few hours. So risk of some drizzly rain across parts of Kent. Then that will be followed by a northerly wind that should bring some showers, particularly to eastern areas of England, the coastal areas in particular. And that will also bring quite a lot of cloud along these coastal areas. Further north and west, though, it will be a clear night. And here is where it could turn quite cold across parts of rural Scotland. Could be down as low as -4. The frost will be fairly patchy. That does develop, and it should clear quite quickly as the sun does come up quite quickly as well. And it will feel fairly pleasant in the sunshine by the afternoon if you are sheltered from the wind in the north and west, particularly parts of South Wales, southwestern parts of Scotland. We could see temperatures towards the mid-teens. But in the east, it'll be quite a different feel, still similar to how it has been recently. That northerly wind keeping temperatures below double digits for some areas in northeastern areas of England. It'll be a very cold start to Thursday, and then we see an area of low pressure out in the North Sea bring this band of cloud and rain across northern areas of England, parts of Scotland as well. And then it does look like it will turn a little bit more unsettled from the south and west into the weekend, but it turns a little bit warmer.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with the very latest. Long queues heading southeast of Glasgow down the M74. The motorway is partly blocked just before the toll